Chapter 219. The weather was just right. Luya had moved a stool, and was sitting under the shade of the flowers in the garden, chatting idly. When she heard that someone wanted to see her, she called for them to come in, but her hands did not stop working. Young mistress went out with old mistress today. Will Mama come back later, or do you want me to pass on the message? Luya raised her head and glanced at the servant. She recognized that it was Servant Zhang from the second gate, and was slightly surprised. Servant Zhang quickly smiled and said, "This matter can't wait. Only when young mistress returns can you make a decision." Young mistress, the people in the outer courtyard said that a woman came with a young girl. They said that they are young mistress relatives. When asked who they are, they stammered and refused to say. They only said that young mistress will know when she sees them. You see, now that Sangwon was firmly in the position of mistress of the household, no one dared to neglect her matters. If it was in the past, the gatekeeper would have already chased them away. Why would they report this matter to the higher-ups? Young mistress relatives? Luya was also stunned. If they were the Shi family's relatives, it would be more likely. The Sang family's relatives rarely came around. Moreover, who would come all the way to Qingzhou? However, since that mother and daughter pair said that young mistress would know when she sees them, they were probably not lying. Young mistress, why don't you go take a look? Or did the old slave bring them in? Servant Zhang quickly said with a smile. I'll go take a look, Luya said as she put down the sewing basket in her hands. She stood up and brushed her sleeves. After saying a few words, she left with Servant Zhang. When they exited the second gate and arrived at the outer courtyard's gatehouse, they saw a woman wearing a maroon embroidered robe and an ivory skirt. She was waiting there with a young girl wearing an autumn fragrance dress. The woman's eyes looked around mischievously, full of curiosity. The young girl, on the other hand, was quite uneasy. She lowered her head and unconsciously played with her fingers. Young Mistress Luya, you're here. When the gatekeeper saw Luya, he quickly went forward with a smile and pointed at the mother and daughter. He did not even have the time to speak politely. The woman rushed over like a gust of wind, grabbed Luya's hand, and shouted with a smile. Luya, you're finally here. We've been waiting for half a day. The gatekeeper and old Madame Zhang were both stunned. She was not bluffing. So, she was really young mistress's relative. However, young mistress was such a refined person. How could she have such an unpresentable relative? Not to mention the two of them muttering in their hearts. Luya was extremely embarrassed. It took her a lot of effort to withdraw her hand. She smiled vaguely and said, Why are you here? Since you're here, come in with me. Luya sighed in her heart. She didn't expect Li to bring Sang Yin to her door. She didn't know what they wanted to do. Li proudly glanced at the gatekeeper and old Madame Zhang, who were stunned. She raised her chin and said, Why is it only you? Where's Wan Yang? Why don't I see her? When the gatekeeper and old Madame Zhang heard her calling out their young mistress's name, they couldn't help but lower their heads. This unruly woman was not only young mistress's relative, but she also seemed to be quite close to her. Young mistress accompanied old Madame out as a guest today. Quickly come in with me. Sit down, have some tea, and eat something. We'll talk about it when young mistress comes back. Luya smiled as she walked forward. At this moment, she really wanted to stuff Li's mouth. Young mistress and Miss Gu were in the middle of a heated argument, when second old Madame Zhang suddenly rushed over. Wasn't she disrupting young mistress's plans? I say Luya, walk slower. Do you want to tire me to death? Li was very dissatisfied. She panted as she rushed forward to grab Luya. After noticing the surprise in the gatekeeper and old Madame Zhang's eyes, Li felt that she was noble. She was the second aunt of the Shi family's young mistress. Thus, she did not care much about Luya. Seeing that they had already entered the second gate, Luya slowed down and smiled. Our young mistress's place is still a little far from here. Second old Madame Zhang, let's hurry up and go back earlier so that you can rest. Is it still very far? TSK, the Shi family is really extravagant. The land that their family occupies is already as big as our entire village. Li could not help but look around. What she saw were tall and bright houses. Pavilions could be seen amidst the lush flowers and trees. Everywhere there was a rich and beautiful atmosphere. She looked greedily and could not stop praising. After a while she shouted, I say Luya, my legs are about to break from walking so far. Why aren't there any palanquins? There should be palanquins in this big family, right? Go and call 2 palanquins over. Mother. Sang Yen felt very embarrassed and could not help but gently tug at Li's sleeve. Li did not notice and continued to shout for Luya to call for palanquins. One must know that Li could not bear to pay for the carriage fees, so the coachman dropped them off when they entered Qingzhou. Li originally thought that since the Shi family was in Qingzhou, she would definitely be able to find out if she asked around. Why waste the money? Who knew that even though she asked around, Qingzhou was huge? From the city gate to the Shi family's residence, the mother and daughter's legs were about to break. Originally, they were still holding on with one breath, but now that they had reached their destination, how could they hold on? Luya did not know whether to laugh or cry. Call for palanquins? Second old Madame Zhang really dared to say that. Usually, in the household, even the young mistress could not call for palanquins. Only the first madam had this privilege. She was not polite at all. The moment she opened her mouth, she was arrogant and bossy. Luya could not help but frown slightly and felt displeased. Li relied on her status as the master, and did not put Luya in her eyes. When she saw Luya's expression, she was annoyed. Seeing that there was a rock at the side, she simply sat down and rubbed her arms and legs while shouting, I'm not walking anymore. I'm really tired to death. Luya, quickly call for the palanquins. Mother, what are you doing? Ever since Sang Yen entered the Shi family, she felt restrained and uncomfortable everywhere. Seeing her mother's rude behavior, she was so ashamed that her face flushed red. Stand to the side. You have no right to speak. Li saw that she was not on the same page as her, and glared at her angrily. Luya was so anxious that sparks flew everywhere. She smiled bitterly and said, Second old mistress, quickly get up. This isn't a place to sit. Only the servants would casually sit around like this. It's not that I don't want to call for the palanquins, but there are rules in the fu. Normally, aside from the eldest old mistress, even the eldest young mistress can't easily call for the palanquins. If you're tired, we'll walk slower. This isn't a place to talk. There are such rules? Li didn't believe her. Why would I lie to you? If you don't believe me, you can ask the eldest young mistress when she comes back. Luya hurriedly said. Mother, it's better if you quickly get up. It shouldn't be too far away. Sang Yen also hurriedly pulled Li. Fine. Li finally got up. She patted her butt and muttered, You lass, don't forget your roots after entering the city. Humph, I'll ask Wan Yang later. If you lie to me, I'll settle accounts with you. Yes, how would I dare lie to you? Luya let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly led the way with a smile. She only hoped that they wouldn't meet anyone on the way so that she could quickly lead them back to Ning Garden. Unexpectedly, what she feared came true. Not long after, she saw Gu Fengzi and Lan Xiang walking towards her. Luya's expression changed as if she had been struck by lightning. She could only bow and greet. Young Miss Biao. Gu Fengzi was just strolling around the garden, because she had nothing to do. Who knew that she would bump into Luya? Originally, she didn't pay much attention to it and passed by after greeting her. Unexpectedly, she discovered that the middle-aged woman behind Luya was looking at her with a pair of shining eyes. Her eyes flickered with a greed and amazement that she was familiar with. Gu Fengzi was born with a bit of beauty, coupled with the fact that she had been pampered in the Shi family since she was a child. Her appearance was no different from that of a true daughter of a wealthy family. At this moment, she was wearing a light yellow robe with flowers and leaves. Inside, she was wearing a silver-blue silk robe with a vertical collar. Below, she wore a pink and white satin skirt with fish scales. At the edge of the skirt, there was a 2-inch lace border with gold and silver threads. At her waist, there was a sachet with a luan belt. When she moved, she revealed the tips of her shoes embroidered with pink begonias. Her exquisite hair bun was adorned with dazzling pearls and jade, making her look extremely exquisite and precious. Lili loved to look at these things the most. When she saw them, she couldn't help but look at them. Gu Fengzi noticed and smiled at her. Lan Xiang, on the other hand, couldn't take it anymore. She saw that Li and Sang Yan's clothes weren't outstanding, and that they didn't even have any decent jewelry in their hair bun. One of them was vulgar and the other was timid. Lan Xiang assumed that they were servants that Sangwon had picked from the farmstead to serve her. Her expression immediately darkened and she reprimanded. Impudent. Is Miss Biao someone you can fancy? Quickly apologized to Miss Biao. Only then did Luya realize what was going on. She was secretly annoyed at Li's shallow eyelids. Just as she was about to say something, Li put her hands on her hips and raised her chin. She fiercely said to Lan Xiang, "You're the impudent one. Little girl, you've got guts. Do you know who I am? I'm your eldest young mistress's second aunt." Luya felt a wave of dizziness, and she secretly glared at Li. Earlier, in front of the gatekeeper and old Madame Zhang, she didn't want them to know about her relationship with Sangwon. She didn't want them to know about her relationship with Sangwon, who knew that she would meet Gu Fangzi and her servant. What? Lan Xiang's eyes widened in shock. She didn't ask this question on purpose, but she was really frightened. Gu Fangzi was also stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. She quickly covered her mouth with her handkerchief to hold back her laughter. What? Li was annoyed by Lan Xiang's reaction. She glared at her and snorted. If you don't believe me, you can ask Luya. Why would this old lady lie to you? Was there even a need to ask? Luya's face that looked like she wanted to cry but couldn't laugh or cry was enough to explain everything. So it's second madam-in-law. Gu Fangzi smiled and stepped forward. She curtsied to Li and said with a smile, "This girl is shallow and doesn't know any better. Second madam-in-law, please don't lower yourself to her level. It's a disgrace to your status." Li saw that Gu Fangzi, a flower-like person, was curtsying to her and speaking so intimately and politely to her. She immediately had a good impression of her and said with a smile, "You're Miss Gu? Hee, Miss Gu is really polite. You're also as beautiful as a fairy. You really make people like you at first sight. It's common for girls to not know any better. Why would I bother with her?" Chapter 220. After a few words, Gu Fangzi had a basic understanding of what kind of person Li was. She was secretly amused. How could she let go of such an opportunity? She quickly smiled and said, "Second old mistress-in-law, you're too kind." "What Miss Cousin sounds so distant. My name is Gu Fangzi. If you don't mind, you can call me Fangzi. You're a magnanimous person and won't be calculative with this servant." As she spoke, she continued to praise her. "Kiki, good, then I won't be polite. Fangzi Kiki. That's good. That's more like a relative. You don't have to call me second old mistress-in-law, just call me aunt." Seeing Gu Fangzi praise her, Li was so happy that her entire body itched. All the pores on her body opened up, and she felt so light that she almost flew into the sky. Gu Fangzi pursed her lips and smiled. "Aunt, you're still treating me like an outsider. I'll just call you second aunt then. That's good. Li was so happy that she couldn't find North. What was there to be unwilling about? She only felt that this Miss Cousin was truly a good person. Seeing her looking at Sang Yan, she quickly pulled her forward and smiled. "This is my daughter, Sang Yan, and also your young mistress's cousin. Yan, hurry and greet your cousin." Sang Yan was already panicking, and was at a loss of what to do. In front of the dazzling and carefree Gu Fangzi, she felt so ashamed that she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. When she was pulled forward by her mother, she became even more flustered. After a while she called out softly, "Cousin." Li was extremely dissatisfied with Sang Yan's performance. She felt that Sang Yan was too timid and embarrassed herself. She frowned and pinched Sang Yan's wrist. Sang Yan clenched her teeth in pain and her eyes turned red. "Younger sister, you don't have to be so polite." Gu Fangzi chuckled as she held Sang Yan's hand. Sizing her up, she smiled and said, "Little sister, you don't have to be nervous. I get along very well with elder sister. Her little sister is also my little sister. Hee, with one look, I can tell that younger sister is an obedient and lovable girl. This is our first meeting, and I haven't prepared anything good for younger sister. I hope that younger sister can accept this hibiscus golden hairpin as a token of my appreciation." After saying that, he pulled out the golden hairpin. which was made of gold, ruby as its petals, and rice beads as its stamen, from her hair bun, and thoughtfully put it on for Sang Yen. Sang Yen wanted to refuse, but how could she say anything? She stiffened and allowed Gu Fangzi to manipulate her. Li saw that the gold hairpin was dazzling, and the gemstone was flawless and bright. She estimated that the gold was at least 1 tael, and wondered how much it was worth. Since it was pulled out from Miss Gu's head, it definitely wouldn't be cheap. Her face was full of smiles as she repeatedly said, "I don't dare, I don't dare." She then stretched out her finger and poked Sang Yan's head as she lectured. "This girl is really stupid. Why aren't you thanking older cousin?" Sang Yan was even more embarrassed. She couldn't wait to turn around and leave. She lowered her head and timidly said, "Thank you, older cousin. Second aunt and younger sister, you don't have to be so polite." Gu Fangzi smiled and said, "It's rare for second aunt to come. It's a pity that elder sister went out with aunt as a guest today. I don't know when she'll be back. If second aunt doesn't mind, why don't you come over to my place?" "That's right, I wonder if second aunt has eaten yet?" Li didn't even think about it before agreeing. When she heard that she had eaten, she suddenly felt hungry. She hurriedly smiled and said, "We rushed here so early in the morning, how could we have time to eat?" "Aya, don't starve second aunt and younger sister. Let's go quickly. I'll have someone prepare food," Gu Fangzi said as she supported Li to leave. "Fangzi, you're really a good person. I'll have to trouble you. We're all relatives, what's the trouble?" Gu Fangzi pursed her lips and smiled. Gu Fangzi and Li had been chatting and laughing with each other since the beginning. Luya opened her mouth a few times to say something, but she couldn't get a word in. Now that she saw that Gu Fangzi was about to take Li away, Luya was really anxious. Li was originally someone who didn't know how to act, and Gu Fangzi was so evil. If she really brought her to Peony Park, who knows what she would ask Li and say. Luya couldn't care less about the rules and hurriedly went forward to stop her. She smiled and said, "Second old mistress, young mistress might be back soon. Why don't you come with me to Ning Garden to see her first?" Li didn't have a good impression of Luya. Not only Luya, but she was also jealous and hateful of Gu Fangzi. Even she couldn't explain the contradiction in her heart. At this moment, she had finally met a true young miss who was respectful and flattering to her. Madame Li's vanity had reached its peak. She liked this feeling too much and enjoyed it too much. How could she let it go? She said, "Wan Yang isn't back yet, right? Since Fangzi is so enthusiastic, I'll go over to her place first. When Wan Yang is back, you can ask Wan Yang to come and fetch us." Li deliberately wanted to show off in front of Gu Fangzi that she was Sang Wan's elder, so she immediately instructed Luya. Gu Fangzi was laughing so hard that her stomach hurt. She also smiled and nodded. "That's right, Luya. Isn't it good for second aunt to come over to my place to sit and chat? Sister isn't here now, so won't she be bored in Ning Garden? Why? Afraid that I'll bully second aunt or be rude to her? No. Fangzi, you're so good to me, so why would I think that?" Li quickly waved her hands. "Miss Gu," Luya was not willing to let her go, so she said to Gu Fangzi, "Ning Garden also has a small kitchen, so Miss Gu need not worry about young mistress's relatives. We servants will serve them, otherwise if young mistress scolds us for being lazy, we won't be able to bear the consequences. Please forgive us, Miss Gu. If Miss Gu really likes second old mistress, then we'll report to young mistress and accompany second old mistress to be a guest at Miss Gu's place." Gu Fangzi sighed softly and said softly, "Luya, what's wrong with you? Second aunt and I hit it off, so I'm only inviting her to my place to sit and chat. Why must you stop us? Is this your idea, or sister's? Sister's relatives are also my relatives, so I'll naturally treat them with respect. Besides, I'm helping sister entertain the guests, so sister might even be grateful to me, so why would she blame you?" Lan Xiang chimed in. "Second old mistress is the mistress, and the mistress's matters will naturally be decided by her. How can a servant overstep her authority?" When Li heard that, she straightened her chest and frowned as she reprimanded Luya. "All right, Luya, you can go back first. I'll sit at Wu Fangzi's place, so there's no need for you to follow me. No matter how much Wan Yang dotes on you, you're still just a servant, so don't meddle too much." In the past, I can't be bothered to say anything, but the Sure family is a big family with rules and regulations. You've been here for quite some time now, so why haven't you learned such a simple principle? Gu Fangzi curled her lips slightly and thought to herself. It can be seen that their relationship isn't that good, but that's good. I'll be able to use it. Luya did not know whether to laugh or cry after hearing her lecture, so she said, Second old mistress, please forgive me. It's not easy for you to come all the way here, so I'm sure you have a lot to say to young mistress. Why don't you follow this servant to Ning Garden? Wouldn't it be more convenient? Young mistress has always disliked troubling others. If she knows that this servant is careless and has caused you trouble for Miss Gu, she will definitely be unhappy. Li suddenly hesitated. She rushed over to look for Sangwon, so of course she had something to say. If Sangwon was really unhappy, would she still help her? Although it felt good to be flattered, compared to the actual benefits, she still had a sense of propriety. You lass, you're becoming more and more eloquent. Big sister has always been gentle and obedient, so why would she be unhappy? Second aunt, let's go. At most, I'll accompany you to see Big sister and personally tell her that I was the one who pulled you over to relieve your boredom. I'm sure Big sister won't have any objections. Gu Fangzi saw that Li was hesitating and pulled her away. Li was in a dilemma and could not bear to leave. She nodded and smiled. All right, I'll go with you. Luya, don't talk too much. Let's go back. Second madam. Luya was anxious and stepped forward to stop her. Impudent. Gu Fangzi shouted in a low voice. She opened her mouth to speak but held back. She only tilted her head to look at Li. Li saw that Luya was not tactful and became angry. She glared at her and said, What? You're just a servant, and you're trying to meddle in your master's affairs? Is this what Wan Yang taught you? Where I go is none of your business. Go away. Luya, what happened? A deep middle-aged woman's voice came from the side. It was Mama Li with two young maidservants. Mama Li had finished her business and returned to Ning Garden. She heard from the maidservants that the young mistress's relatives had come, and that Luya had gone to pick them up. She didn't care at first and only ordered the maidservants to carefully look around the courtyard and the house to see if there was anything that needed to be cleaned up. This was to prevent the young mistress from losing face when the guests came, who knew that after waiting for a while, she still did not see Luya come back. Based on her experience, Mama Li knew that something must have happened. She hurriedly brought people to look for her. Coincidentally, they met Gu Fangzi, who was about to leave with Li and her daughter. Luya stepped forward to stop them. Godmother. Luya saw that Mama Li had arrived and immediately let out a sigh of relief. She quickly went forward to explain the situation, and then stood to the side to listen to Mama Li's decision. Mama Li smiled and said, Miss Biao, how can we trouble Miss Biao to take care of the young mistress's relatives? Isn't this clearly not giving young mistress any face? Second old mistress Gu, you should follow me to Ning Garden. Young mistress should be back soon. When Gu Fangzi saw that Mama Li had arrived, she knew that she would not be able to get what she wanted. Seeing that Mama Li had spoken so harshly, Gu Fangzi's expression changed slightly, and she lowered her head with a look of grievance. Li was unhappy when she saw that. When she heard Luya call Mama Li godmother, she immediately categorized her as being in the same group as Luya. When she saw Gu Fangzi's grievance, she felt disgusted and frowned. Ai Mama, I was the one who wanted to go with Fangzi. What does it have to do with you? You're just a servant. Second old mistress Gu. Luya hurriedly interrupted her and said, My godmother is old mistress's nanny. She is also young master's nanny. Young master and young mistress have always respected her. She is not a servant. Chapter 221. Luya. Mama Li waved her hand to stop Luya. She smiled at Li and said, Second Madam Li wasn't wrong. The old slave is just a servant. Thanks to eldest young master and eldest young mistress, the matters of Ning Garden are mostly handled by the old slave, your eldest young mistress relative, so the old slave should naturally invite you to Ning Garden to serve him well. If there's anything, wait for eldest young mistress to return before making a fuss. Luya, what are you still standing there for? Hurry and help second Madam Li over. Yes, godmother. Luya gave a meaningful look. The two maidservants also stepped forward and pulled Li and Sang Yin over. Li opened her mouth to refute. But Mama Li's expression was stern and solemn. For a moment, she was unable to say anything and was pulled away by Luya. After walking for about 10 steps, Li finally regained her senses. She turned her head and waved at Gu Fengzi as she shouted, "Fengzi, you go back first. I'll come see you when I have time." Gu Fengzi and Lan Xiang laughed and nodded at her. "This foolish countrywoman is very interesting. I didn't expect eldest young mistress to have such an interesting relative." Lan Xiang mocked. Gu Fengzi snorted and coldly said, "Sangwan, that slut, is originally a crude country girl. Having a relative like this is a good match for her." After saying that, she brought Lan Xiang back to Peony Park. She hated herself for speaking too much. If she knew that Mama Li would come, she would have pulled Li away. Mama Li and Luya were startled by Li's shout. Mama Li had lived under the influence of rules all her life and disliked people who did not follow the rules. She glanced at Li and frowned slightly. She did not want to say anything, but she could not help but stop and say, "Second Madam Li, if you have anything to say to Miss Gu, just instruct a maidservant to pass the message. If you shout so loudly, she may not be able to hear you. Secondly, don't you find it tiring? Thirdly, if the servants hear you, it won't be dignified enough. Also, even if you get along well with Miss Gu, don't call her by her name. Our old mistress has always doted on Miss Gu. I'm afraid that old mistress will be unhappy if she sees you calling her young mistress." Li was unhappy and said, "It was Fengzi who asked me to call her that. Can I do that? Even young mistress has never called Miss Gu by her name." Mama Li said with a straight face. Li was embarrassed and said, "Oh." She did not say anything else. Entering the Ning garden, they passed through the main hall and went around the corridor on the left. They saw the flowers were flourishing, colorful. The buildings were tall and imposing, imposing and imposing. The doors and windows were brand new. The vermilion paint was eye-catching. On the corridor's whitewashed walls, there were various types of leaky windows, exquisitely carved and lifelike. Li felt that her pair of eyes were not enough to take in everything. She was so engrossed that she almost bumped into a pillar in front of her. She was secretly envious. Mama Li led the mother and daughter directly into the warm room where Sangwon usually lived. She invited them to sit on the soft couch and ordered the maidservants to fetch water and serve them tea. Luya had already ordered the servants to prepare 2 bowls of noodles and pushed Mama Li away to rest. "It's fine with me here. Godmother, go and rest." Mama Li didn't really like Li, but Li was Sangwon's maternal family, so she couldn't say anything. Seeing Luya hurriedly drive her away, she knew what she was thinking. She smiled at her and said, "Then you serve them well. Let's wait for young mistress to come back before we make a fuss." She then left. Luya finally let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly went in with a smile. "Second madam, third miss, it's not too early or too late. I told the kitchen to make 2 bowls of noodles. Feel free to eat a few mouthfuls. It's not early today, so you probably won't be able to go back. Tonight, I'll make a few more dishes to entertain you." When Li heard Luya say that she was going to make 2 bowls of noodles for her and her mother, she was a bit unhappy. Seeing that Luya was tactful and didn't want to drive her away, she smiled and said, "We came all the way here with great difficulty and wanted to stay for a few more days. Luya, do you think Wan Yang will drive us away? How could young mistress do that?" Luya smiled, but she was complaining in her heart. "That's right. Wan Yang has always been a conscientious person." Li smiled and nodded. She looked around the room and praised, "The Sher family is really rich. They want me to stay for a few more days to broaden my horizons. We don't have such good cloth even if we wanted to make clothes, but they're actually using it as a tablecloth. TSK, those gold, silver, jade and porcelain decorations are really beautiful. It's dazzling. Each one of them must be worth a lot of money, right?" Luya was afraid that she would have the same thought as her eldest son-in-law. So she smiled and said, "It probably isn't cheap. I don't know about that either. These things are all registered in the storehouse, but because of young mistress's status, they were taken out for display. They are changed every season and have to be returned to the storehouse when the time comes. Lee made an oh sound and drank 2 mouthfuls of tea. She kept looking at the blue and white porcelain teacup with lotus patterns. Not long after, a young maidservant came in with a red lacquer tray. Luya stepped forward to take it and gestured for her to leave. "Second madam, third miss, quickly come and eat," Luya said as she placed 2 bowls of noodles on the small round table. "Actually, we're not that hungry. We'll have to trouble you." Lee pretended to speak as she got up. She was very unhappy in her heart. Who hasn't eaten noodles before? We came all the way here, and you didn't even prepare something delicious. You sent us away with a bowl of noodles. You're becoming more and more stingy. When she sat down at the table, she saw the various seasonings in the fine white noodles, such as dried scallops, ham, shrimp, winter bamboo shoots, and shiitake mushrooms. She also saw the fragrant mincemeat topping. Smelling the fragrance, she couldn't help but swallow her saliva. She picked up her chopsticks and impatiently took a bite. The noodles were made with the highest quality white flour with eggs added to the broth. Coupled with the cooking skills of the kitchen maids, how could it be the same as the noodles Lee usually ate? Lee couldn't care about anything else. After a few mouthfuls, she felt a bit more energetic. She picked up the bowl and gulped down a few mouthfuls of soup. Wiping her mouth, she turned to Luya and said with a smile, "It's delicious, but it's not spicy enough. Go bring me some chili." "Yes," Luya agreed. She lifted the curtain and went out to instruct a servant. A moment later, she came back with a bowl of chili noodles. Lee scooped a spoonful into the bowl, mixed it, and tasted it. She then added 2 more spoonfuls. The entire bowl was red. Only then did she continue to eat with satisfaction. She said, "The chili in your residence is really not that good. It's not spicy enough." Luya glanced at the red bowl of noodles and felt her scalp go numb. She smiled and said, "The masters in the residence don't eat spicy food. Eldest young master and eldest young mistress also don't eat spicy food." While they were talking, Lee had already swept the large bowl of noodles clean. She even drank the soup until there wasn't a drop left. Seeing that there were some minced scallions and minced meat at the bottom and edge of the bowl, Lee picked them up with her chopsticks and ate them. She smiled at Luya and said, "Is there more? Give me another bowl." Although Luya was not unfamiliar with Lee, she had never seen Lee like this. She was stunned for a moment, and did not respond to Lee's words. "What? You can't even eat another bowl of noodles? The Sher family can't be so stingy, right?" Lee was unhappy. No, how could that be? Luya secretly wiped her sweat. Why didn't she know that this second old mistress could eat so much? "It's dinner time soon. If you eat too much, how can you eat dinner? Why don't I ask the servants to bring 2 plates of desserts for second old mistress?" "That's fine too." Madame Lee nodded. Seeing that her daughter was still leisurely eating, she couldn't help but scold. "Why are you so slow in everything you do? Hurry up and eat. The kitchen is waiting to clean up the dishes." Sang Yin had been unhappy ever since she came in. Although the noodles were fragrant, they tasted like wax in her mouth. After being scolded by her mother, how could she continue eating? She put down her chopsticks and said with a bitter face, I'm done eating. I don't want to eat anymore." "You don't want to eat anymore?" Lee frowned. "What a waste. Hurry up and eat more. You didn't eat lunch. Aren't you hungry?" "I really have enough." Sang Yin shook her head. "If you don't want to eat, I'll eat. It's a waste." After saying that, Li Shi stretched out her hand and pulled the bowl in front of Sang Yin over. She lowered her head and finished the bowl in a few bites. Then, she let out a sigh of relief and smiled at Luya. "Luya, quickly bring the snacks over." "Mother." Sang Yin pulled Li a little embarrassedly and looked at Luya embarrassedly. "What are you doing? Luya is not an outsider. So what if she's an outsider? It's such a pity to waste such good noodles." "Luya, don't you think so?" Lee glared at her daughter with dissatisfaction. "Second old mistress is right. I'll go get the desserts now. You wait here." Luya smiled and didn't think that Lee's actions were inappropriate. He also came from the countryside and naturally knew how precious food was. However, Lee's attitude made him look down on her. Luya secretly prayed in her heart, "Young mistress, please come back soon. This servant really doesn't dare to let others serve this second old mistress. It'll really make a fool of herself." After a while, Luya brought in 3 to 4 plates of sweet pastries such as osmanthus cake, water chestnut cake, golden date cake, and other sweet pastries. She placed them in front of Lee with a smile. As for the 2 empty bowls, she put them aside and thought that she would wash them when there was no one in the kitchen at night. Luya really didn't want to take the bowls back since the bottom of the bowls were so shiny. She would be laughed at behind her back. Hee, rich people are really different. Tsk, look at how exquisite and beautiful these pastries are. Just by smelling it, it's so fragrant. Lee held a piece of crystal clear water chestnut cake in her hand and praised. Luya was afraid that she would sweep everything away again, so the pastries she brought were all sweet and full. Seeing this, she hurriedly smiled and said, "First, old mistress, try 1 or 2 pieces of each and see how it tastes. There'll be more delicious food tonight. I've already instructed the kitchen to prepare the dishes, so you have to leave some space in your stomach. When you go back, I'll pack a few more boxes of these pastries for you to take back and slowly taste." Hee, that's good, that's good. When Lee heard that there would be more delicious food tonight, and that the pastries could be taken away, she became much more refined and stopped after tasting 1 piece of each. Chapter 222. Luya was about to let the 2 of them sit down and rest, but who knew that Lee's mouth would not stop? She pulled Luya, sighed, and began to complain, talking endlessly about the family's matters. Luya was annoyed listening to her, but it was not convenient for her to leave, so she could only answer perfunctorily. Lee, on the other hand, became more and more enthusiastic. Luya could not bear to listen to her. "Eldest young mistress is back." A young maidservant's clear shout finally sounded from the door, followed by the sound of footsteps and rustling of clothes. "Wanyang is back. Wanyang." Lee's eyes lit up, and she got up to rush out. "Second, madam." Luya quickly pulled her back and said, "You're an elder, so it's only right for you to wait for eldest young mistress to come and greet her. If you go out like this, people will laugh at you for not knowing the rules." Lee thought that it was true, so she coughed twice and pretended to sit down. She raised her head and urged Luya, "Quickly go and call Wanyang in." "Yes, I'll go right now." "Second, madam." "Wait here and don't go out. Eldest young mistress has come back from being a guest, so she has to change her clothes and wash her face before coming to see you. Please wait patiently." Luya lifted the curtain and went out after saying that. When Sangwon came back, she heard a maidservant quietly inform her that second madam and third miss had come. She was so shocked that her expression almost changed. After accompanying Wang back to the main courtyard to settle down, she hurriedly rushed to Ning Garden. When she saw Luya come out to greet her with a normal expression, Sangwon's hanging heart finally settled down. "Where are my second aunt and third cousin?" Sangwon did not wait for Luya to greet her and asked. Luya supported her and said with a smile, "Young mistress, please change your clothes first. Second madam and third miss are doing well in the warm room. Young mistress, don't worry." Sangwon nodded with a smile and entered the inner room to change her clothes. She smiled at Luya and said, "Fortunately, you didn't go with me today. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened." "Isn't that so? What a coincidence." Luya smiled and dismissed the maidservant. She helped Sangwon change her clothes by herself. She lowered her voice and said, "Good Kai, this servant is here today. Fortunately, godmother came later. When I brought second madam and the others in, I didn't expect to meet Miss Biao on the way." As Luya spoke, she briefly recounted what had happened at that time and said, "This servant will tell young mistress, so that young mistress will have a plan in mind. Otherwise, young mistress would still be kept in the dark if Miss Biao were to do anything." Sangwon was shocked and angry. Her palms were slightly cold. She gritted her teeth and said, "This woman is simply crazy. She's capable of doing anything. Today, it's all thanks to you and Mama. If second aunt was really taken away by her, it would be terrible." Sangwon didn't dare to imagine what would happen if Gu Fangzi took away Li. Li didn't have a brain, and with her mouth, what couldn't she get out of Gu Fangzi? At that time, if she led Li to her mother-in-law, Sangwon shivered slightly and said, We can't let them stay here. We have to send them away tomorrow morning. Luya smiled and said, Young mistress, then you have to think of a way. What don't you know about our second madam? Since she's here, how can she leave so easily? She told this servant today that she wanted to see the world and stay in the manor for a few more days. Sangwon's eyes flashed slightly and said, I'll think of a way. It wasn't easy for her to stabilize her hard-earned status and identity today. She definitely couldn't allow this nondescript Madam Li to smear her name with a thick stroke of black ink. The two of them had always treated her family harshly and didn't show any kindness. Now, they were only relying on that little bit of blood relationship. She didn't owe them anything, so it wasn't worthwhile for her to be implicated by them. Sangwon hurriedly changed into a set of green clothes with grape-like patterns. She took off the complicated and expensive jewelry and loosely tied her hair into a simple hairstyle. She inserted 2 jade hairpins embedded with gems and then came out with Luya's hand. She suddenly stopped and said to Luya, Mama she. Luya smiled bitterly. When second madam and third miss came in, it was this servant who received them. Mama went to busy herself with other things. This servant doesn't dare to let her say anything in front of Mama. It's too embarrassing. Sangwon laughed and gently tapped Luya's forehead with her finger. This sly girl is becoming more and more clever. The master and servant lifted the curtain and entered the warm room. Before Sangwon could say second aunt, she saw Li rush over like a gust of wind and tightly grab her hand. Wanyang, you're finally back. Second aunt has been waiting and looking forward to seeing you. Second aunt, quickly sit down and talk. I didn't know that second aunt was coming. Today, I went out with my mother-in-law as a guest. I've made second aunt wait. Sangwon pulled her hand back and sat down on the main seat. We haven't seen each other in a long time. Sit down and I'll tell you slowly. There's a lot to say. Li smiled and wanted to sit down next to Sangwon without thinking. Luya hurriedly stopped her and said with a smile, Second madam, that's eldest young master's seat. Please sit here. As she said this, she raised her hand and guided her to sit down next to Sangwon. Li said unhappily, My niece-in-law isn't here right now. I want to get closer to Wanyang, so why can't I sit in this empty seat? You're becoming more and more daring. Wanyang, look, she even dares to pick on me. Li only felt disappointed. She angrily glared at Luya and turned to Sangwon, asking Sangwon to make a decision for her. Luya opened her mouth and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When it came to people like Li, there was really no one to reason with. Second aunt, Luya has always been as outspoken as my sister-in-law. She says whatever she wants to say. Second aunt, why do you have to be so calculative with her? Please sit down. You must have something to say since you came all the way here, right? Sangwon smiled and raised her hand to indicate the guest seat next to her. It was obvious that she had the same intention as Luya to let her sit there. Li said oh in embarrassment and didn't say anything. She went over and sat down. She could ignore Luya's words, but she didn't dare to ignore Sangwon's words. Sangyen stood behind Li, and her head was almost buried in her chest. She fidgeted with her fingers uneasily and her face was red with embarrassment. Sangwon saw her like this and couldn't bear it. She smiled and said, Third sister, you also sit down. There are no outsiders here, so there's no need to stand on ceremony. That's right. Your own sister isn't an outsider. Why are you standing there like a block of wood? Hurry up and greet your sister. You're getting more and more stupid. You don't even know how to call her sister. Wanyang, don't lower yourself to her level. This wretched girl is too timid to see the world. Li turned her head and glared at Sangyen. She scolded her again. Sangyen was so ashamed that she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. She had no choice but to come out from behind her mother. She timidly glanced at Sangwon and hurriedly lowered her head again. She softly called out, Sister. Sangwon suddenly felt that she was a little pitiful. She didn't know if she was lucky or unlucky to have a mother like Li. If she was lucky, then everything was arranged by Li since she was young. With Li's protection, she had no worries and didn't need to think about anything. There was a time when Sangwon was very envious of her. If she was unlucky, then her current personality was obviously Li's masterpiece. If there was a day when Li wasn't around, Then she would be like a little chick without the protection of a hen's wings. Would she be able to live an independent life? Younger sister, sit down. Sang-won smiled. Sang-yen had already been pulled to sit down by Lee. This girl is too timid. Sang-won saw that Lee was about to start nagging and scolding Sang-yen again. She hurriedly coughed and interrupted with a smile. That's right, second aunt. Why don't you tell me what you're here for today? AI. Lee swallowed the words she was about to say. She sighed and began to complain to Sang-won. Won-young, your second aunt's life is really bitter. Ever since I entered your Sang family, I've worked hard for this family. Even if I don't have any merits, I should at least have worked hard, right? I never thought that your second uncle would be so heartless. When he saw that I was old and had become a haggard old woman, he had crooked thoughts and took in a concubine. What about having a son and continuing the family line? Those were all lies. He just thought that I was old and had a change of heart. That man, there's not a single good thing. They're all heartless and unscrupulous. Just because he had some spare money in his hands, he began to play around and threw his wife and children to the back of his head. Lee began to pour out her grievances, scolding Ryoko Obira for being heartless. She gave several examples, such as how she had worked hard in the past, and how she had worked hard for this family. Now that Vixen was lazy, a wastrel, and even dared to talk back to her. Yet he was actually protecting that Vixen, etc. Luya stood beside Sang-won with her hands hanging by her side. When she heard the first sentence, she silently added the second sentence in her heart. She couldn't help but secretly praise Lee for having a good memory. Before her young mistress returned, she had already complained to her once. Now that she was complaining again, it was almost exactly the same. Sang-won felt extremely awkward when she heard it. She thought to herself, what does the grudges between you two have to do with me? Could it be that you want me to stand up for you and uphold justice for you? You're thinking too highly of me. Sang-won wanted to interrupt Lee a few times, but she saw that she was eloquent like a river. Just as she called out second aunt, she was interrupted by Lee's, Won-young, you don't know. Sang-won simply couldn't be bothered to interrupt her. She held the teacup in a daze. If she wanted to say it, then let her say it. After all, there were no outsiders here. Mother. Actually, the one who felt the most uncomfortable was Sang-yen. Hearing her mother talk about her biological father's ugly deeds in full detail in front of her cousin, her face started to burn. Hearing her mother's words becoming more and more unbearable, she finally couldn't hold it in any longer. She gently tugged at her mother's sleeve and begged with tears in her eyes, Mother, don't say it anymore. Why can't I say it when he did it? Lee finally found someone to pour out her grievances. How could she let it go so easily? She was filled with grief and indignation when she was interrupted by her own daughter. She was abnormally angry and poked Sang-yen's head a few times, causing Sang-yen's head to shake. You heartless wretched girl. Have you forgotten who your mother is? Who raised you and protected you? You're actually siding with your heartless father. Little ingrate, I've raised you for nothing. Chapter 223. Mother. I didn't. Sang-yen was ashamed. In front of Sang-won, she felt so embarrassed that she couldn't back down. She covered her face with both hands and started crying. Second aunt, don't you know third sister's character? How can she feel good if you accuse her like this? Stop talking about it. Sang-won persuaded and gave Luya a look. Luya went forward and patted Sang-yen's back gently. She whispered, Third missy, don't cry. There are a lot of servants outside. If they hear you, they will laugh at you. Sang-yen paused and immediately stopped crying. Second aunt, didn't second uncle just take a concubine? You've been with second uncle for most of your life. Do you think he would divorce you? Why are you so angry? Sang-won smiled. The anger in your heart has subsided. Let's not talk about those things anymore. Even if you tell me, I can't do anything about it. Lee scoffed. Divorce me? He dares. I just feel bitter in my heart. Ai Won-young, our family is different from yours. The Sure family is rich. It doesn't matter if your niece-in-law takes in 8 or 10 concubines. But how can we, a country family, have so much spare money? Our Ayan's dowry hasn't even been prepared yet. His old man actually spent nearly 100 taels of silver to buy a vixen. Isn't he deliberately angering me to death? Sangwon couldn't help but feel angry when she heard this. Her hand that was holding the handkerchief tightly trembled. Is this something an elder should say? Why does it sound so ear-piercing? Luya's face was also filled with displeasure. Her face sank as she glared at Lee. Young master and young mistress have such a good relationship, but second old mistress is so good. She opened her mouth and said 8 or 10 concubines. She herself doesn't like concubines, but she thinks that it's not a big deal for other families to have a few more concubines. What kind of mentality is this? Lee was still complaining when she suddenly felt something strange. She glanced at Sangwon and then at Luya. Her voice unconsciously became softer until it disappeared. She was a little confused. No matter how stupid she was, she could tell that Sangwon and Luya were angry, but she didn't know why they were angry. Lily felt a burst of anger. Thinking that she had a request to make, she had no choice but to suppress the anger in her heart. She laughed dryly and said, Wan Yang, second aunt doesn't know how to speak. If I say something wrong, please don't take issue with second aunt. Sigh, forget it, let's not talk about it. There's no point in talking too much about those things. Second aunt is just complaining. After talking to you, I feel much better. I won't say any more. I won't say any more. Sangwon forced a smile and glanced at her. She lowered her head and took a sip of tea without saying anything. She thought to herself, you feel much better in your heart, but you don't forget to cause trouble for others. Does our first branch have a natural enmity with your second branch? Every time we meet, you won't let us have a good time. Sangwon felt a wave of disgust, but she couldn't help but laugh at herself. She thought to herself, it's not like this is the first time I found out what kind of person she is, so why bother bickering with her? That would be truly stupid. It's already quite late. Second aunt must be hungry, right? Luya, send someone to the kitchen to take a look. If the dishes are ready, then set the table. Yes, young mistress. Luya acknowledged and retreated. When Lee saw that Sangwon's face finally revealed a smile, she knew that she wasn't angry with her. She then breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly said with a smile, Good, good. Then let's eat first. We'll talk after eating. The dishes were already prepared. After Luya had the servants set the table in the dining room, she dismissed the maidservants and then came over to invite Sangwon and Lee. During the meal, only Luya served at the side. Looking at the table full of exquisite, beautiful and fragrant dishes, Lee's eyes couldn't help but shine and salivate even though she wasn't very hungry. When Sangwon greeted them, she hurriedly pulled her daughter to sit down and couldn't wait to eat. She beamed with joy and praised the dishes. Sangyin secretly glanced at Sangwon and saw that her behavior was relaxed and calm, compared to her own mother who was like a hungry tiger coming down the mountain. Sangyin secretly smiled bitterly. She thought to herself that she had already lost face long ago, so it didn't matter if she lost face now. As Lee ate, she praised the dishes while constantly asking Luya what this was, what that was and how to make it. Luya just casually answered and perfunctorily. Halfway through the meal, Lee suddenly stopped moving her chopsticks and raised her head to look at Sangwon and asked curiously, Wan Yang ah, don't you have other maidservants here to serve you? Why is Luya always at the side? Luya secretly glanced at her and thought to herself, how can other people stand your attitude? If they see it, who knows how many witty words they'll make to make fun of you tomorrow. I'm afraid that even young mistress will be made fun of by others. You still have the nerve to ask. Seeing the dripping soup on the table, the bones, fish bones, ginger slices, garlic skin, and other things on the ground, Luya couldn't help but feel annoyed. In a while, she would have to clean up first before calling the maidservants to come in and clean up. The others have also been tired for the day, so I let them all rest. Besides, I'm used to Luya serving me closely, Sangwon said with a smile. That's true. Lee nodded in a serious manner. This servant, she's been serving me since I was young, so I know her well. The maidservants of large families are the most crafty. If they're not careful, they'll make trouble for their masters. Especially for someone like you, who comes from a small family. I'm afraid they won't put you in their eyes. Shouldn't you be more careful and be more careful? It's better to use Luya. Second, madam. Luya couldn't bear it anymore and said with a sullen face, "You're already so old. Don't you know that trouble comes from careless talk? What will people think of our young mistress if they hear you say such things? Young mistress, do you still want to be a person? You maidservant, you dare to lecture me?" Li was so angry that she pointed at Luya with her chopsticks and said to Sangwon, "Wanyang, look, she dares to talk to me like that." Sangwon gritted her teeth in hatred. She only hated that she was younger, otherwise, she would have given her a good attitude. If these words fell into the ears of the maidservants, just like what Luya said, what would they think of her? Second aunt, those words aren't good. Moreover, our family isn't so complicated. You're thinking too much. Let's eat quickly. I think you're tired today, so rest early after eating, Sangwon said indifferently without even looking at her. Mother, why are you being so nosy about cousin's family matters? Let's stop talking and eat. Sangyen finally spoke her first smooth sentence ever since she entered the Sher household. Sangwon's face became very ugly. She was really shocked. Li was unhappy that Sangwon didn't stand up for her, but she also felt her anger. She laughed and said, "I'm just worried about Wanyang, so I couldn't help but say a few words. Wanyang, don't think too much. Hee, let's eat. Let's not talk about it." After the meal, Sangwon led the two of them back to the warm room. Mama Li had already sent the maidservants away, so only she and Xingji were in the room to serve them. She raised the curtain and led them into the warm room. She hurriedly asked someone to bring them tea to rinse their mouths. Li only thought that it was tea for drinking. She burped and waved her hand, saying, "I just ate, and my stomach is full with rejong. I don't want to drink tea yet. Put it here, there's no need." The maidservant pursed her lips and smiled, saying, "Madam, this tea is for rinsing your mouth, not for drinking." Hee, is that so? Your family is very particular. Li laughed and glanced at Sangwon. She then took the tea and did as she was told. "Young mistress, old slave has already asked someone to prepare a guest room. There's also hot water in the kitchen. When madam and the others go back, I'll ask someone to send it over." Mama Li stepped forward and said with a smile, "Thank you, Mama. I forgot about this matter." Sangwon thought for a moment and said with a smile, "Tonight, we'll clean up the side room and let my second aunt and cousin stay. There's no need to use the guest room. Mama, you've been busy all day. You should go and rest. It's enough to have Luya and Xingji." "Yes, old slave will go first." Mama Li curtsied and retreated. Li didn't have a good impression of Mama Li. She saw her glance at her before she left, as if she had some hidden meaning. Li was even more unhappy. She said to Sangwon, "This mama is the wet nurse of my nephew's son-in-law? The wet nurse of this rich family is quite arrogant. She acts like a real mother. Wanyang, you really have a good temper. You treat her so." Second aunt. Sangwon's voice became stern. She stared at Li and said, "Mama is the wet nurse of eldest young master. She worked hard to take care of eldest young master. Even in front of my mother-in-law, eldest young master is very respectful to her. Second aunt, don't talk nonsense." Li opened her mouth and stared at Sangwon. She was speechless for a long time. She was originally thinking about how to tell Sangwon about what happened today, so that Sangwon could help her teach Mama Li a lesson. Who knew that Sangwon would protect her first? Li couldn't help but feel a little flustered. However, there was nothing she could do. She could only cough and drink tea to cover it up. Sangwon felt that if she argued with her over this, she would simply be looking for trouble. She calmed down and said, "Second aunt, why did you come here today? Quickly say it. Once you're done, go back to your room and rest. I've asked someone to prepare a carriage. I'll send second aunt back tomorrow morning. If second aunt doesn't go back, will the family really feel relieved? Are you really not worried that second uncle will be instigated by that concubine to do something again?" Li didn't speak for a long time. She originally wanted to stay for a few more days, but when the words reached her mouth, she couldn't say it. When Sangyen heard this, she secretly sighed in relief. If she really stayed in the Sher family for a few more days, with her mother's personality, who knew what kind of joke she would make? She felt as if she was sitting on pins and needles. Mother, cousin is right. If you have something to say, quickly say it. Cousin. She will help you think of a way. There are so many things at home. How can we leave them behind? It's the busy season right now, so we should hurry back. Sang Yin hurriedly advised. That's fine too. Li agreed unhappily. She smiled and said, Wan Yang, after the busy season, I'll bring A Yin to see you again. Sang Wan vaguely said, Second aunt, next time you want to come, have someone send a letter to say hello first. Wait for my reply before coming again. Otherwise, how can things be like today? Fortunately, Luya didn't go out with me today. Li hurriedly smiled and said, Today I met your family's Miss Gu Fangzi. She's quite a good person. She even invited me over for a chat. Wan Yang, you have to help me say goodbye to her tomorrow. When I return, I'll go see her again. Chapter 224. Second Aunt. Sang Wan's face sunk as she coldly said, It's best if you don't call out Miss Gu's name and don't appear to be so intimate with her. You don't understand the manners matters, so don't blindly interfere. I'll only tell you one thing, stay away from Miss Gu. If you see her next time, stay far away from her. Do you understand? Mentioning today's matter, she was filled with anger. She didn't know if Li's brain was made of grass or wood chips. She wasn't a noble lady, nor was she a person of virtue and prestige. Wearing the clothes of a rural woman, she would be an ordinary person no matter where she went. Gu Fangzi had only met her for the first time. If she didn't have any other intentions, how could she be so intimate with her? Why is this? I think she's a good person. She speaks in a friendly manner and treats people with courtesy. Li was very confused. How could she believe Sang Wan's words? Sang Wan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She wanted to cry, but had no tears. She and Gu Fangzi's grudges were only half revealed to her sister-in-law, Fang. It was even more impossible for her to tell Li. She dared to guarantee that if she said one sentence to Li today, once she returned to the countryside, she would say 100 sentences. Then, she would just wait for her to be discredited. Don't talk about this anymore. In short, remember my words. I can't explain the matters of the manor clearly to you. Some things will only invite trouble, so you just need to remember this. Let's talk about business. Why did you come looking for me today? Sang Wan suppressed the impatience in her heart as she spoke. Li saw her suddenly become strict. That high and mighty aura made her feel a bit timid. She was in a daze and realized that there was a deep gap between her and Sang Wan. She was in a position that she would never be able to reach in this lifetime. She could no longer do whatever she wanted to her like before, or act like an elder in front of her and order her around. Li suddenly felt a little dejected, but there was nothing she could do. She sighed and glanced at Sang Yin. Wan Yang, second aunt has done many things to let you down in the past. Can you be magnanimous and not be calculative with second aunt? What happened in the past was all second aunt's fault. Second aunt will apologize to you. Second aunt will listen to whatever you say. The next time second aunt sees Miss Gu, second aunt will stay far away from her. Wan Yang, are you satisfied? Sang Wan didn't expect her to say something like this. She was startled for a moment. Her heart was slightly moved, but she still sighed inwardly. Second aunt was still the same second aunt from the past. Even if she gave in and said nice things to her now, she was still the same second aunt from the past. As the saying goes, it's easier to change mountains and rivers than to change one's nature. Sang Wan didn't expect her to really repent. If she really did repent, she wouldn't have said those words to Sang Wan. She didn't mention Sang Hong, Fang, Sang Yufei and the others. Did she do many things to let her down? She even let down her two nephews. Those years she took joy in other people's misfortune, watched from the sidelines, spread rumors, and took advantage of others. Sang Wan remembered it all clearly. If it wasn't for a powerful sister-in-law who went against her, she was afraid that her family's property would have already been taken away by her husband and wife. Those things are all in the past. Second aunt, why are you still bringing him up? Sang Wan said indifferently. Right. It's all in the past. Now that you're living such a rich life, it's clear that good people will be rewarded. Li gave a sigh of relief and quickly nodded. She then sighed. Second aunt only has your third sister in this life. AI, second aunt's heart can't let go of her if she doesn't have a good home. Wanyang, now that you have a lot of connections and know a lot of good people, can you see if you can find a suitable family for Ayen? If Ayen has a good home, then I can rest assured. In the future, I can also help you out. This marriage relationship is more reliable than anything else. Mother, what are you talking about? Sang Yan's face turned red and she lowered her head, almost burying it in her chest. She never thought that after her mother and father had a big fight over the new concubine, they brought her to find her cousin because of her marriage. This is your cousin, not an outsider. What are you embarrassed about? Li Shi unhappily glared at Sang Yan and pushed her. Hurry up and beg your cousin. She'll help you find a good family. You'll be able to eat and drink well for the rest of your life, and you won't have to worry about anything. Sang Wan was also stunned for a moment. She originally thought that Li came to complain to her because she wanted a sum of money. Since she came to her door, as long as she asked, there was no reason for her to refuse. What she never thought was that she was actually talking about Sang Yan's marriage. Sang Wan suddenly felt a headache coming on as she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sang Yan's parents were still alive, and she was a married aunt. Moreover, Sang Yan and her were of the same generation. For her to decide Sang Yan's marriage, it was ridiculous. She really didn't know what Li was thinking. Mother. Sang Yan was so ashamed that she spoke with a nasal voice. Her eyes turned red and she wished that she could find a hole to hide in. This was too embarrassing. If she knew that her mother brought her here today to talk about this matter, she wouldn't have come even if she was beaten to death. What was this? Don't pull me, quickly say a few good words to your cousin. Li shook off Sang Yan's hand and pushed her forward. How could Sang Yan be willing? She twisted her body and ran to a corner to stand with her back facing them. She bit her lip and tears uncontrollably rolled down her face. Stupid girl, you're so disappointing. Li gritted her teeth and hurriedly smiled at Sang Wan. Wan Yang ah. Ayen is always like this. She gets embarrassed at the slightest thing. What's there to be embarrassed about when we're family? It's also fortunate that it's you, Wan Yang, who won't argue with her. Wan Yang, second aunt will leave this matter to you. You must help Ayen find a good husband. Second aunt will be grateful for your kindness for the rest of my life. Second aunt. Sang Wan suppressed the shock in her heart and thought for a moment before saying, Second aunt ah. Since ancient times, marriage has been decided by the parents. You and second uncle are both healthy and healthy. How can I interfere with cousin's marriage? Second aunt, even if you don't care, I can't not care. If others know, they will say that my hands are too long and reach into my maiden family. Second aunt, forgive me for not being able to help you with this matter. This concerns cousin's happiness for the rest of her life. How many years have I lived? How would I know how to judge people? This responsibility is too heavy and I can't bear it. Moreover, I'm just a young daughter-in-law. How can I inquire about another family's young master? Second aunt, you're making things difficult for me. I see that cousin isn't young anymore. You should find a good family for her. When the time comes, I will personally send a generous gift to add to cousin's dowry. What do you think, second aunt? When Li heard Sang Wan's rejection, her boiling hot heart instantly turned cold. A wave of resentment and sourness arose spontaneously, and she was secretly unhappy. She blamed Sang Wan for not being considerate. Now that she had become rich, she looked down on her poor relatives and refused to lend a helping hand. She must be afraid that in the future, her daughter would marry better than her and surpass her, and she would be jealous. Li originally wanted to say a few more words, but when she heard Sang Wan say that she would personally send a generous gift to add to Sang Yan's dowry, she couldn't bring herself to complain anymore. The only person she could ask for help from now was Sang Wan. If Sang Wan wasn't willing to help her, what else could she do? If she angered her, she wouldn't even be able to add to her dowry. Wouldn't that be a big loss? If she really was willing to fork out a generous sum of money to add to her daughter's dowry, it would be enough to buy a few hundred mu of fertile land. Her daughter wouldn't have to worry for the rest of her life. Li and Rizhong were still hesitating when Sang Wan smiled and said, Then it's settled. It's already quite late and second aunt still has to hurry on with the journey tomorrow morning. You should go and rest now. It's rare for you to come over, and I don't have anything good to give you. Later, I'll ask Luya to prepare a few pieces of cloth and a few boxes of rouge and face powder for my cousin to use. Lee hurriedly smiled and said, Then I'll have to thank you. I've been worrying about your younger sister's dowry for the past 2 years. With your words, I'm relieved. I want to give her 400 mu of fertile land, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a suitable one. How about Wan Young help me with this? Luya rolled her eyes at the side. She thought that second madam really wasn't polite. The moment she opened her mouth, she asked for 400 mu of fertile land and a few thousand taels. Sangwon was also very unhappy. She frowned and said, When the time comes, I'll help second aunt out however much she needs. That's right. How is eldest cousin's marriage? This was originally their family matter, and Sangwon didn't want to talk too much about it. However, when she saw how Lee only cared about Sang-ro and shamelessly schemed against her, she couldn't help but feel that it was unfair that she didn't mention Sang-ro at all. Lee's face immediately showed a disgusted expression and said, With her bad temper, which good family would want her? I'm also worried if there was someone who wanted her. Even if I had to fork out some money, I'd be more than happy to send her off. I've long stopped caring about her matters. Isn't there still her father? How can I care about so much by myself? 1 yen is enough to worry about. Second aunt's words aren't right. Sangwon smiled and said, Cousin still calls you mother. If you don't care about her matters, who else will? Second uncle is a man. How would he know about these matters? Second aunt, you have to worry about her. There isn't a family where the eldest daughter doesn't get married, but the youngest daughter gets married first. Don't you think so too, second aunt? Lee saw that Sangwon was obviously protecting Sang-ro, and her heart immediately became unhappy. She vaguely agreed and a thought flashed through her mind. She patted her head and said, I almost forgot to tell you something big. Lee then told her about the last time Sangwon went back and how Ryo Kuwabira and Sang-ro had designs on Shifengju. She added some oil and vinegar and proudly claimed credit. That shameless brat was so happy when she heard her father's words that the corners of her eyes were smiling. I couldn't stand looking at that vixen and scratched her face, leaving 2 bloody scars. Even now there are still traces of it. Wan Yang, you're kind and considerate of others. Look, that kind of heartless person is still scheming against you behind your back. Sangwon was shocked and angry. She couldn't say anything for a long time. It seemed that she was really meddling in other people's business. She believed that Lee didn't lie to her about this matter. It wasn't impossible for her second uncle to do such a thing. Second aunt was really thinking for Sang Yan's good. She didn't have any thoughts of stuffing her into her side. Chapter 225. Wan Yang, don't doubt me. If you don't believe me, you can ask Ayen. Ayen was the one who accidentally overheard it and told me about it. Ayen has never lied since she was young. Lee saw that Sangwon did not say anything. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. Sangwon smiled faintly and said, Second aunt, don't worry. When Cousin Mei gets married, I will definitely give you enough face. Cousin Mei should indeed find a husband, so you should help her take a look. Otherwise, who knew what kind of troublesome things would happen in the future? What you said makes sense. I'll go back and see if there are any suitable families for her. When Li Shi saw that Sangwon was still speaking up for Sang-ro, she couldn't help but secretly despise her. She had never seen someone like her before. She's trying to steal your man, and you're still helping her. Sangwon did not have the mood to talk to her anymore. She would never be able to reason with someone like Li as long as she understood her meaning and did not cause trouble. It's getting late. I'll ask Luya to bring you and Cousin Mei down to rest. Sangwon said. Madame Li still wanted to say something, but when Sang Yen heard those words, she suddenly felt that there was hope for the torture to end. She didn't care about her embarrassment and hurriedly walked over and pulled on Madame Li's sleeve. Mother, I'm tired. Let's go back and rest. Cousin Mei must be tired after a busy day. She still has to wake up early tomorrow morning to greet the Shi family's first mistress. Sangwon could not help but glance at Sang Yen and thought to herself, second aunt and second uncle are so unreliable, but this third sister is so pure. She's much better than her parents. Then we'll go first. Li saw her daughter looking at her pitifully and could not bear to reject her, so she agreed to go. However, she was still thinking about the things that Sangwon said she would bring back tomorrow. Seeing that Sangwon looked indifferent and unwilling to say more, she pulled Luya along and said, "Didn't Wanyang say that she has rouge, powder and cloth for us to bring back? Send it to our room later, so that I can tidy it up. Also, don't forget to pack a box of the snacks you mentioned." "Mother." Sang Yan's face turned red with shame. Luya held back her helplessness and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She smiled and said, "Second madam, don't worry. I'll pack it up later and give it to you early tomorrow. I promise you won't be late." Li had no choice but to let it go. In the warm room, Sangwon still felt uncomfortable, as if she had swallowed a fly. She stared at the glass lamp at the side for a moment before calling out, "Servants, come." She ordered for a brush, ink, paper and inkstone to be prepared. Under the lamp, she wrote a letter to her brother and sister-in-law. Today's situation could not happen a second time. Why did Li suddenly run over? She had to ask her eldest brother and sister-in-law what was going on so that they could be on guard in the future. Early the next morning, Sangwon personally sent Li and Sangyan off to the carriage. Seeing the carriage disappear from her sight, Sangwon secretly let out a sigh of relief. After returning to Ning Garden to wash up and eat breakfast, Sangwon saw that it was about time, and went to pay her respects to Wang. Coincidentally, she bumped into Gu Fangzi at the entrance of the main courtyard, and the two went in together. After paying her respects, she sat down and spoke a few words with Wang as usual. Gu Fangzi took a moment to look at Sangwon and said with a smile, "Older sister, yesterday I met your maternal aunt and younger cousin in the garden. Why didn't you bring them to meet your maternal aunt?" Sangwon clenched her fists and secretly thanked her lucky stars that she had sent Li away. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to cover it up. Wang was very surprised. She let out an "oh" and smiled at Sangwon. "Yesterday the second madam of the in-law came? Wanyang, why didn't you say so yesterday? Quickly, invite the young miss of the in-law over. I want to meet them too." Wang had met the Sang brothers in Fang before, and had a good impression of the Sang family. Hearing that Sangwon's maternal family had come, she naturally wouldn't neglect them. "That's right, older sister." Gu Fangzi also smiled. "Yesterday we met in the garden and I only greeted them. I haven't formally greeted them yet." Sangwon stood up and smiled at Wang. "I was just about to tell mother about this, but younger sister coincidentally brought it up first. My second aunt and third cousin were just passing by yesterday. They had other matters to attend to and left early this morning. Yesterday, I wanted to come and tell mother, but I was afraid that mother would be tired from attending the banquet and didn't come. I thought that there would be a chance to meet them in the future, so there's no rush." When Wang heard that Li and the others had left, she sighed regretfully and smiled. "You are really too much. In the end, they are relatives of your maternal family. How could I not meet them when it was their first time coming to visit our family? We were just sitting and chatting, but you have to worry too much. Next time, don't be like this, or they will say that you are neglecting them." "Yes, Wanyang will remember. This time, I was only thinking that we are not outsiders and didn't have to be so particular." Sangwon smiled and agreed. Wang smiled and nodded, indicating for her to sit down. Gu Fangzi also smiled, but she couldn't help but feel resentful. She didn't need to think to know that if the Sang family's second madam were to meet with her aunt, she would be able to talk to her from the side. There was no need to worry that this dignified and reserved young mistress wouldn't lose face. Unfortunately, that foolish woman had left. Needless to say, it was definitely Sangwon's doing. Gu Fangzi couldn't help but feel angry. If she had known earlier, she would have told her aunt last night. She never expected that Sangwon would be so ruthless. After sitting for a while, Sangwon said her goodbyes and left. She hadn't gone far when she heard someone call out "older sister" from behind. It was Gu Fangzi chasing after her. Sangwon stopped in her tracks and turned around to look behind her. Gu Fangzi stepped forward and ordered the servants to leave. She snorted coldly at Sangwon and said lightly, "Older sister's movements are so fast. Could it be that the madam of the in-laws family is shameful? You actually sent her away so early in the morning? I think she is quite interesting, and I think Aunt will like her. It's a pity that I can't bring her to meet Aunt. I want Aunt to know that older sister's relatives are so extraordinary. Sangwon smiled and said, Second Aunt really did have something to do, so she was in a hurry to leave. Younger sister, why would you say that? I didn't know that younger sister, and she hit it off. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. If I knew that younger sister was so reluctant, I would have asked younger sister to send her off. Gu Fengzi immediately pulled a long face and sneered. Older sister's ability to feign ignorance is getting better and better. That is older sister's second aunt, so what does she have to do with me? If we are talking about birds of a feather, shouldn't she be in the same group as older sister? No wonder older sister was in a hurry to send her away. If Aunt saw her, wouldn't older sister lose face? She would think that older sister is like that in private too. Sangwon said coldly, It's not up to you to talk about my relatives. Younger sister, if you have such thoughts, why don't you pay more attention to the Gu family? They are younger sister's real relatives. Gu Fengzi, I'm warning you. I know what you wanted to do yesterday. If you continue to be so impudent, don't blame me for being impolite. Then what? Gu Fengzi's face sank and she said coldly, Sangwon, you first pretended to be a pig to eat the tiger and snatch my big cousin away. Now you're showing off your strength, using your status to pressure me, and even urging my big cousin to chase me away. When have you ever been courteous to me? Sangwon, you must be content with what you have. This is what I wanted to say to you. Since you want to kill me, don't blame me for being impolite. Sangwon shook her head. I really have nothing to say to you. You and eldest young master grew up together. You should know his temperament better than I do. If there were true feelings between the two of you, no matter what I do, how could it affect him? And what he wants to do, how could I urge him to do it or make the decision? You're looking down on him too much. You knew that he had an engagement with me, but you still walked so close to him without any hesitation. If you want to blame someone, then you are the one who started it all. No matter what the result is, it's all because of your own actions. You're blaming everything on me. Gu Fengzi, don't you have any shame? Gu Fengzi was stunned for a moment. She stared blankly at Sangwon. Her mind was buzzing and she couldn't find a single word to refute. Sangwon didn't pay any more attention to her. She turned around and walked away. Gu Fengzi stood there in a daze. Her trembling hands were tightly clenched. In the silence around her, she could clearly hear her own heartbeat and her slightly disordered breathing. The sun shone brightly above her head. The wind blew gently, and the mottled shadows on the ground swayed slightly. Under the warm spring sun, Gu Fengzi felt cold and dazed. She stared blankly in front of her. The world in her eyes seemed to have changed, becoming illusory. Is it really my fault? Yes, it was my intention to get close to eldest cousin. But what's wrong with that? He's so outstanding and has so much wealth. I admire him, I like him. Is that wrong? He once had me in his heart. It can be seen that he also likes me. But when did things become like this? Could it be that he never really liked me? Gu Fengzi muttered in her heart. The more she thought about it, the more confused and disheartened she became. Her heart ached and her eyes gradually filled with tears. No, it can't be. It's definitely not like that. Gu Fengzi shook her head. She lifted her handkerchief to wipe away the tears in her eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, Sangwon, you're talking nonsense. If it wasn't for you, it wouldn't have become like this. Young miss, let's go back. Lan Xiang stood to the side. Seeing her expression changing, suddenly angry, suddenly sad, and suddenly fierce, she couldn't help but worry. She went forward to support her arm. Let go. Gu Fengzi forcefully shook her off. She coldly said, I don't need you to help me. I can walk on my own. She always believed that in this world, the only thing she could rely on was herself. If she wanted something, she had to fight for it. No one would give in to her. Sangwon thought that after this storm, her days would be peaceful for a while. Unexpectedly at noon, when she was about to eat lunch, Xiao Chun rushed in with a panicked expression. She didn't wait for the announcement and directly rushed in front of Sangwon. Young mistress, it's bad, it's bad. Quickly go to young mistress. Something happened to young master. Chapter 226. There was a moment of silence. The chopsticks in Sangwon's hand fell to the ground and her heart tightened. What did you say? What happened to eldest young master? Sangwon trembled slightly and almost couldn't stand straight. This news came too suddenly. Something happened to eldest young master? Who said so? Where's the messenger? What exactly happened? Tell me quickly. As they spoke, Mama Lee also rushed over. Her face was even uglier than Sangwon's and her hands kept shaking Xiao-chun. All the maidservants in the house had a huge change in expression, and they all stared at Xiao-chun. Ai. Xiao-chun was shocked by everyone's reaction and stuttered, unable to say anything. Nanny! Sangwon resisted the urge to collapse and pulled Mama Lee before saying reluctantly, Let's go to mother's. Right. Mama Lee hurriedly supported Sangwon and went out of the door. She staggered and pulled Sangwon, causing the two to almost fall. All the maidservants in the house screamed in fear. In the main courtyard, the situation was even worse. The moment Sangwon entered, she saw Chang Huan kneeling in the hall, and Wang crying Fengjiu. Nanny Jiang, Xiao Li, and the others were bitterly consoling her. It was a gloomy atmosphere. Mother! Sangwon's nose turned sour and her eyes became moist. She took a few steps forward and knelt beside Wang. Pulling on her sleeve, she held back her tears and said, Mother, don't be like this. If eldest young master knows about this, how will he feel? Mother, what exactly happened? Eldest young master has been doing things outside for a day or two. How can he not have a plan in his heart? With the experienced servants by his side, no matter how big the matter is, he will definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Mother, don't be sad. Old mistress, young mistress is right. Eldest young master will definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. If you fall ill from crying, won't eldest young master be distressed when he comes back? Nanny Jiang also hurriedly tried to persuade her. Zhan Huan did not expect Wang Shi's reaction to be so big, and was momentarily stunned. When he saw Sangwon inadvertently glaring at him, it was as if he had just woken up from a dream. He hurriedly crawled forward and kowtowed a few times before sobbing. This lowly one did not speak clearly and frightened old mistress. Old mistress, don't worry, there's a famous doctor looking after him. Young master will definitely be fine. The injuries on his body are just superficial wounds. Really? Wang stopped crying and looked at Chang Huan with sparkling eyes. Yes. Chang Huan hurriedly said, How many brains do I have to deceive first, madam? Fengjiu, my son. You must come back safely. Otherwise, I don't want to live anymore. Wang Shi covered her face and began to cry again. Nanny Jiang and the others secretly sighed in relief. They knew that her crying meant that she had regained her composure. Mama Lee was also crying. She went forward to persuade Wang with Nanny Jiang and the others. It wasn't easy to persuade her. Wang wiped her tears and saw that Sangwon was still kneeling beside her. She held her arm and said, Wan Yang, quickly get up. Don't cry. Sangwon stood up as instructed. Upon hearing those words, tears rolled down her cheeks like pearls from a broken necklace before finally stopping. What exactly happened? Tell me in detail. Wang ordered Sangwon to sit down. She calmed herself down and asked Chang Huan again. Aunt, what happened to big cousin? What happened to big cousin? Before Chang Huan could speak, Gu Fengzi rushed in like a gust of wind. As soon as she saw Wang Shi, tears rolled down her cheeks, and she threw herself into Wang Shi's arms. She hugged her and cried, Eldest cousin, aunt. Wang, who had just calmed down, couldn't help but feel sad again. She hugged Gu Fengzi and cried. Mama Lee glared at Gu Fengzi anxiously. She was waiting anxiously for Chang Huan to explain the ins and outs of the matter. But this unruly thing had to rush in and mess things up. Nanny Jiang also frowned slightly. Wang was an old woman. How could she bear the news that her beloved son was in trouble? It wasn't easy to persuade her, but she came and made a mess. If she really cared about her elders, how could she not care about her elders' health? Sangwon and Mama Lee were both angry. She hurriedly pulled Wang to persuade her. Nanny Jiang also comforted her. She gave Xiao Chun, Xiao Li, and the others a look to forcibly pull Gu Fangzi away. Gu Fangzi was crying. She hugged Wang and refused to let go. She kept crying, "Big cousin." She was really heartbroken. Sangwon couldn't bear it anymore. She shouted, "Little sister." In a cold voice she said, "Young master just met with a small accident. It won't be a big deal. Why are you crying like this?" "How is it a small accident? It's all." Gu Fangzi stopped talking halfway. She wiped her tears and said, "Aunt Big Cousin will be fine. Don't be sad. Miss Biao, please sit to the side. Let Chang Huan quickly explain the situation." Mama Li stared at Gu Fangzi unhappily. She thought to herself, "What are you saying now? Young mistress is right. Why are you crying like this? I didn't see you cry like this when your father passed away." "Pei Pei, what am I talking about?" Xiao Chun and Xiao Li helped Lan Xiang help Gu Fangzi sit to the side. When Sangwon saw that Wang had calmed down, she ordered Chang Huan, "Hurry up and tell me." Chang Huan agreed and told her the whole story. It turned out that Shi Fengju was looking for Shi Fengming and Dazhou. He quickly found out that Shi Fengming and the brothel girl had left Dazhou and went south. As for where they went south, he didn't know. Although he couldn't find Shi Fengming, he knew that Shi Fengming was safe and sound. This could be considered an explanation to second uncle and second aunt. He was worried about his mother and Sangwon, so he planned to go home first. He only ordered the shopkeepers in the towns along the south to be on the lookout. Once Shi Fengming's whereabouts were discovered, they would secretly send people to follow him and report his whereabouts. Unexpectedly, when the boat arrived at Handan Pier and docked to resupply, Shi Fengju only wanted to hurry home. That night, he didn't go ashore to stay at an inn. Instead, he stayed in the cabin and waited for the boat to depart at dawn. Who knew that one of the boats would catch fire in the middle of the night? The fire took advantage of the wind and no one noticed it in the dead of night. Soon a large number of boats docked at the pier caught fire. Shi Fengju's boat wasn't spared either. That night, the raging fire reflected the surface of the water red. The crackling sound of flames could be heard everywhere. Thick smoke rolled in from all directions. Ghosts wailed and wolves howled on and off the boat. It was a mess. In the midst of this chaos, Shi Fengju was accidentally hit by a burning pillar and fell into the water. He didn't fare well in the middle of the night. After he was rescued, he remained unconscious. The doctor said that he was unconscious mainly because of the smoke and heavy objects. He couldn't guarantee that he would wake up, but he could only try his best. Chang Huan and the others were also injured, but none of them were unconscious. When they heard this, they all panicked. They begged the doctor and asked around to see if there were any famous doctors in the nearby towns. They all knew very well that if anything happened to eldest young master, eldest madam would definitely tear them apart. Not to mention eldest madam, they all had feelings for eldest young master after being with him for so many years. Everyone hoped that he would get better soon. 3 days passed, but Shi Fengju still didn't wake up. After some discussion, they didn't dare to be negligent. Everyone stayed behind to watch over him. Chang Huan hired a carriage to return to Qingzhou day and night to report. No one dared to say what would happen next. It was up to the masters to decide. Useless things. How did you all serve him? When Gu Fangzi heard this, she hatefully said to Chang Huan, "All of you were fine, but eldest cousin encountered this kind of thing. At that time, weren't you all busy running for your lives? Slaves who betray their masters. If anything happens to eldest cousin, I'll take your lives. This slave deserves to die." Chang Huan was so scared that she shrank her neck and kowtowed with all her might. You also know that you deserve to die. Chang Huan, eldest cousin used to value you so much. Is this how you repay him? Let me ask you, where were you when eldest cousin was in trouble? How could you not be by his side? Gu Fengzi's eyebrows were furrowed. She was very angry. Wang's eyes were wet. She lifted her handkerchief to wipe them and glared at Chang Huan with hatred. Younger sister. Sangwon was extremely annoyed. She stopped Gu Fengzi and said to Wang, "Mother, things have already happened. Now is not the time to look into this. Chang Huan, how is eldest young master's situation? What did the doctor say? Did eldest young master get better? Why don't you tell me everything? That's right, Changhuan. Quickly tell us. Mama Li also said anxiously. Zhan Huan heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, replying to young mistress, the doctor we invited is the most famous doctor in Handan City, Dr. Li. The abrasions and burns on young master's body have been properly treated and bandaged with medicine. There are no injuries to his muscles or bones. Dr. Li said that as long as it is properly taken care of, the wounds will not be inflamed and will not cause a fever. However, eldest young master was hit in the head by a heavy object and choked on the smoke and water. He is still unconscious. But his breathing is even and his complexion is normal. Dr. Li said that there is most likely a blood clot in his brain. He has been administering acupuncture every day. As long as the blood clot in his brain dissipates, eldest young master will be able to wake up. That means he has not woken up yet? Wang's heart ached, and she was burning with anxiety. You people, how are you all taking care of him? Fengji too, how can he be so careless? If anything happens to him, who am I supposed to rely on? Chang Huan's lips moved as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she closed her mouth and lowered her head even more. Then did Dr. Li say when he will wake up? Wang hurriedly asked. Chang Huan said, Dr. Li, he said it's hard to say. Old mistress, that's why the servant hurried back. Old mistress, please tell me what to do. Chang Huan gritted her teeth and simply said it. If a knife were to stick out, a knife would also stab them. Now that something like this had happened to eldest young master, no matter what the outcome was, they, as servants, could only face it. There was no way they could avoid it. Wang let out a muffled groan and her entire body went limp on the couch. Mother! Sangwon went forward to support her. Mother, which doctor is willing to say for sure? How could mother not know? Since he diagnosed the cause of the illness, and is willing to prescribe medicine and acupuncture for eldest young master, that means he can be saved. Maybe the moment Zhan Huan left, first young master has already woken up. Chapter 227. Yes. Missy, young mistress is right. Young master's health has been good since he was young. He will definitely be fine. Mama Li said while holding back her tears. Yes, Aunt Wang, big cousin will definitely wake up. You have to be at ease. Gu Fengzi's tears flowed again. Wang let out a long sigh and nodded at Sangwon with tears in her eyes. Big sister-in-law, I heard something happened to Fengjiu. Is that true? What exactly happened? As she spoke, second Lord Shi, third Old Master Shi, and his wife walked in one after another. When Wang saw them, she could not help but feel sad again. How could she say anything? Sangwon, Nanny Jiang, and the rest quickly consoled her and explained the situation briefly. When second Old Mistress Shi heard news of her son and that he was fine, she was elated. Suddenly, she realized what kind of occasion they were in, and quickly lowered her eyes to suppress the joy in her heart. At the same time, third Old Mistress Shi and the others also consoled Wang. Big sister-in-law, don't worry. I think that doctor is a sensible person who knows how to use medicine and acupuncture. Fengji will definitely be fine. Previously, we encountered a similar situation in Shuzhong. That person was in a coma for more than half a month before waking up. After waking up, he was fine as usual. His situation was similar to Fengjiu's, so he will definitely wake up. Third Old Master Shi quickly consoled. Yes, our old master is right. I remember that incident too. It was indeed similar to Fengjiu's situation. Third Old Mistress Shi quickly added. Is what you said true? Wang's eyes lit up and she quickly asked. Sangwon, Mama Li, Gu Fengzi, and the rest could not help but feel refreshed as they looked at third Old Master Shi and his wife. It was as if as long as they could get confirmation from them, Shi Fengjiu would definitely wake up. Of course it's true. Third Old Master Shi and his wife quickly nodded. Big sister-in-law, I think we should send someone to take care of Fengjiu and make the decision if anything happens. How can we only have the servants? Third Old Master Shi said. Wang nodded slowly. This was the reason why Chang Huan came back this time. Moreover, she couldn't be at ease without a close relative by her side. If it weren't for the fact that she couldn't bear the fatigue of the long journey, she would have gone herself. It was naturally inconvenient for the two sisters-in-law to go. Third uncle only knew how to walk birds and fish, so he was not reliable. Second uncle was obviously the most suitable. However, this suggestion was made by him, but he did not take the initiative to say it. If he said it himself, it would naturally be inconvenient for him to refuse. However, when he went there, could he do his best? Wang was still hesitating when Gu Fengzi rushed to kneel in the middle of the room and said, "Aunt, let me go. I'm willing to take care of big cousin." "Aunt, don't worry, I'll definitely bring my cousin back to you in one piece." "Mother." Sangwon also knelt down and said, "Mother, I will go. Young master is my husband. Now that something like this has happened to him, as his wife, I won't feel at ease if I'm not by his side. Mother, please grant my wish." Sangwon secretly regretted that she was slower than Gu Fengzi by a step. She would have to waste a lot of time and effort to persuade her. Ever since Chang Huan said to invite a master to make the decision, she already had this idea. Who knew that while she was still hesitating on how to bring it up, Gu Fengzi had already said it first. Everyone was stunned. Wang saw that both of them were worried about her son, and felt gratified. However, she was also in a difficult position. "Elder sister," Gu Fengzi said. "Elder sister is now in charge of everything in this household. How can elder sister leave? Let me go. Elder sister, don't worry, I'll definitely take good care of big cousin. Everything in the household will be fine with mother, and the other stewards taking care of it. Young master's daily life will be taken care of by me. If I go, it'll naturally be more convenient than you. Mother, this daughter-in-law must go. Otherwise, how can my heart be at ease? Mother, please grant my wish." "That's right, young Mississippi. It's rare for young mistress to be so kind. Let young mistress go. The old slave can also help take care of the household's matters. Young mistress is right. Young mistress is taking care of young master's daily needs. Young mistress is very much in line with young master's wishes. There's no one more suitable than her to take care of young master." Mama Li also chimed in. When Chang Huan saw Gu Fengzi kneel down and say that she would go with her, she felt her scalp go numb. She secretly complained in her heart. She had already scolded him to his face just now. If he went with her, who knows how many rows of her head he would have to eat. Thus, he also went forward and kowtowed twice, saying, "Old mistress, according to reason, there's no place for this servant to speak. However, this servant has been by young master's side for a long time. I know that young master often misses young mistress. This servant will definitely be willing for young mistress to take care of him. You're just a servant. If you know that there's no place for you to speak, why are you still talking so much? Don't forget that you're a sinner. What right do you have to speak here?" Gu Fengzi was very angry. She didn't think that Sangwon would have the cheek to make the same request when she had the advantage. As for Mama Li, she had always been on the same side as her. It wasn't surprising that she would speak up for her. It wasn't convenient for her to do anything to the two of them. However, if a servant like Chang Huan also blabbered on her face and she didn't say anything, then she wouldn't be able to stay in this household anymore. When Chang Huan heard her words, she lowered her head and lay on the ground, not daring to make a sound. "Older sister." Gu Fengzi's tears slowly flowed down her white cheeks. With teary eyes, she looked pitifully at Sangwon and said, "Does older sister have to fight with me? I beg older sister to help me. I beg older sister. Let me go take care of eldest cousin." Gu Fengzi gritted her teeth in anger. She might as well go all the way. She moved her knees and kowtowed to Sangwon. Everyone in the room was shocked by her actions, and a soft gasp could be heard in the hall. Sangwon was embarrassed, angry, and hateful. This woman was really shameless. "Younger sister, you can't." Sangwon went forward and helped Mama Li up forcefully. She said, "Younger sister, young master is important, but so is mother. You're used to accompanying mother. With you by mother's side, I can rest assured and go. Let's not talk about this anymore." Third old mistress sure smiled and said, "It's rare for both of you to be so worried about Fengju. This is Fengju's fortune. Eldest sister-in-law, I think what Wan Yang said makes more sense. Fengzi will stay behind to accompany you. Let Wan Yang go. They're husband and wife after all." It's more convenient for them to take care of each other. Although Fangzi said that they haven't consummated their marriage, and it's shameful for a lady, how can it be convenient? Wang nodded and said, "Third sister-in-law, you're right. Wanyang, go back and pack up. You'll be on your way tomorrow morning. It'll be a tough journey. Hurry and send us a letter when you're there. Understand?" "Yes, mother. Don't worry, your daughter-in-law won't dare to delay on the way. I'll send you a letter when I'm there." Sangwon promised respectfully. Wang nodded and said to Gu Fangzi, "Fanger, stay behind and accompany Aunt Ai. Don't worry, Fengji will be fine." Gu Fangzi was extremely disappointed. When she thought about it carefully, not a single person in the house was willing to speak up for her. Everyone was fawning over Sangwon. A wave of resentment and unwillingness surged in her heart, and she almost vomited blood. But so what if she was unwilling? Even her aunt had spoken up. If she insisted, it would only be a joke. "And Aunt, I'll accompany Aunt well. May Bodhisattva bless big cousin to be safe and sound." Gu Fangzi nodded obediently. Everyone comforted Wang for a while before they dispersed. Sangwon was busy going back to Ning Garden to pack up her luggage. On one hand, she ordered for the carriage to be prepared. On the other hand, she had to arrange for the servants to follow her. On the other hand, she had to make arrangements for the household's affairs. Everyone in Ning Garden was so busy that they didn't even have time for dinner. It was only after the lights were switched on that the matters outside were settled. Luya, Xingji, and the others were checking their clothes and luggage under the lights. Sangwon brought along Luya and 2 young and capable daughters-in-law for this trip. Another 4 servants were chosen from the outer courtyard to accompany them. Mama Li and Xingji stayed behind to look after the house. "Nanny, I'll have to trouble you when I'm not around." Sangwon sighed softly. "Young mistress, don't say that. This is what this old servant is supposed to do." Mama Li also sighed. Her nose turned sour as she held back her sadness. "You must bring eldest young master back safely. Nothing can happen to eldest young master." "Nanny, don't worry. I will." Sangwon was also sad. Mama Li knew that she had lost her composure. She blinked her eyes to wipe away the tears in her eyes and forced a smile. "Old slave is really short-sighted. Eldest young master is fine to begin with. What nonsense is he thinking? Young mistress, it's getting late. You should rest early. We have to set off early tomorrow. It's going to be a bumpy journey. You have to take care of yourself. Rest assured. At this time, no one will dare to cause trouble. Even if they do, old slave will report it to First Madam to deal with it." Sangwon nodded. She and Mama Li comforted each other for a while before washing up and returning to their room to rest. However, how could she fall asleep while lying on the bed? It was as if a corner of her heart had been hollowed out. She didn't know when it would be filled. The emptiness made her feel uneasy. For no reason. Her heart would beat faster, and she would be frightened. Her mind was filled with Shifengju. In her previous life and in this life, he had brought her sadness, happiness, despair, and peace. All kinds of memories constantly appeared in her mind. Suddenly, she remembered that his life and death was uncertain. Her heart was in a mess. She had always had him in her life, whether she was willing or not. She had never thought of completely separating herself from him. When she suddenly heard this news, she was undoubtedly shocked and sad. At the same time, she was also flustered and confused. She had lived 2 lives. Could it be that both of them ended in tragedy? It was just that each of them had their own sorrow. Sangwon tossed and turned the entire night. She could vaguely see things through the bead curtain, and got out of bed. Luya, Xingji, and Mama Li had also gotten up. The atmosphere was very gloomy. The maidservants silently helped her freshen up. Mama Li also directed the young maidservants to move the luggage out one by one. After she finished freshening up, the kitchen had already served steaming hot porridge and pastries. This is shredded chicken porridge that was cooked early in the morning. There are also fresh shrimp dumplings and milk-steamed buns. Young mistress, quickly eat it while it's hot. The carriage is already waiting outside the second door. We'll be on the road soon. Mama Li urged. How could Sangwon have the appetite to eat? She shook her head with a bitter smile. In the end, She forced herself to eat a few mouthfuls of porridge before putting it down. She rinsed her mouth and saw that Luya had also finished eating and was waiting for her. She then went out with Mama Lee and the others surrounding her. The two daughters-in-law each held a box of food in their hands as they went upstairs and set the table in the middle of the hall. Steward Zhang, Chang Huan, and the others helped Shi Fengju get off the bed and walked over to sit on the wide back rattan chair. Shi Fengju's eyes flashed, but before he could say anything, Steward Zhang had already tactfully led the others out. In a split second, only Shi Fengju and Sangwon were left in the room. Steward Zhang had never served him closely before, but Chang Huan knew him inside out. She had secretly told him that when the young master and the young mistress were together, they did not like to have people around them. Steward Zhang had secretly noted it down. Shi Fengju's eyes flashed. He knew that Chang Huan had not lied to him. Sangwon took a look and realized that everyone had left. She was a patient. If she didn't serve her, who would? She stood up and scooped a small bowl of soup and gently placed it in front of him. She smiled and said, "Drink some soup to warm your stomach. Tell me what you want to eat, and I will get it for you." Shi Fengju smiled and said, "I can reach it. You don't have to worry about me. You must be tired from the journey. Hurry and eat." As he spoke, he lifted the bowl of soup and scooped up a spoonful to test the temperature of the soup. Then he brought it to her mouth. Sangwon was stunned. She stared blankly at him. Shi Fengju laughed and touched her soft lips with the white porcelain spoon. He smiled and said, "Are you stupid? Hurry and open your mouth." Sangwon mechanically opened her mouth and swallowed. She hurriedly said, I can do it myself. You should eat too. Otherwise, the food will get cold." "Okay." Shi Fengju smiled. Then he lowered his head and slowly ate while chatting with her. After he finished eating, she helped him sit on the couch for a while. Under Steward Zhang's guidance, the two women brought in a wooden basin and a bucket of black medicine. This was to clean Shi Fengju's wounds. After cleaning, they applied ointment and wrapped gauze around his wounds. In the past, this was done by Steward Zhang. Now it was Sangwon's responsibility. Carefully removing the gauze, Sangwon raised her head to look at him from time to time. She smiled and said, "If I hurt you, remember to call me." Shi Fengju saw her squatting in front of the couch and hugging his legs. She lowered her eyes and carefully focused. Looking down from above, he could see her thick and soft eyelashes fluttering gently. Her small and delicate nose was white and cute, and her tender red lips had a faint healthy glow. She was especially attractive. He couldn't help but feel pity and love for her. He reached out to caress her face and neck. He smiled and said, "You've always been careful and gentle. It won't hurt. You're not a rough person like Steward Zhang." Sangwon laughed at his words. Her hands trembled, trying to avoid his claws. She leaned to the side. "Don't mess around." Before he could finish his sentence, Shi Fengju's wound was pulled and he took a deep breath before furrowing his brows. "Does it hurt?" Sangwon was both angry and amused. She hurriedly and carefully supported his legs. She smiled at him and said, "Don't move around. Otherwise, if you damage your wounds, who knows when they'll heal." Shi Fengju laughed and withdrew his hands. He begged her again, "Wan Yang, after applying the medicine, can you ask someone to draw water for me to wipe my body? I can't take a bath these few days. It's so uncomfortable." Although the two of them had already had the most intimate contact, and he used to do it so frequently at home, she was no stranger to his body. However, seeing him naked in front of her and wiping his body for her, Sangwon still found it hard to accept. She said with a slightly embarrassed expression, "It's been so many days. Didn't Steward Zhang and the others help you wipe your body? You love cleanliness so much. How can you stand it?" Shi Fengju's face was filled with disgust. He said, "I'm a man. How can I let a servant do this kind of thing? These few days, I just randomly wiped my hands and feet. When I wipe my body, I still let them wring the towel properly. I do it myself. However, it's still inconvenient, so I'll just put up with it." Sangwon held back her laughter and didn't say anything. She thought to herself, "You have a lot of problems. However, I'm afraid you're just deceiving yourself. You were pulled out of the water wet, but didn't they still strip you naked and change your clothes? You were unconscious for those few days. How could they not wipe your body? When you woke up, you were so picky. They couldn't say it in front of you. Wanyang, look at how pitiful a sick person like me is. Can you help me? You're my wife. Shifengju saw that she didn't speak, so he smiled and shook her hand. Let's apply the medicine first. After I help you lie down on the bed, I'll ask someone to bring hot water. Sangwon accepted her fate. Since he had already spoken, what else could she say? After all, the two of them were husband and wife. They had done everything behind closed doors, so it didn't make a difference. Seeing that she agreed, Shifengju smiled happily and said okay. He leaned on the bed and obediently let her do as she pleased. He didn't touch her again. Only when she occasionally looked up at him would he show her a gentle smile. Every time Sangwon saw it, her heart would immediately skip 2 beats. She hurriedly lowered her head, which made Shifengju laugh silently. He looked at her with more interest. The wound on his leg was more than 2 fingers long. The wound was very deep, and she could clearly see that it had healed a lot. Because of the medicine, the originally white calf was dyed with a large brown color, and had a faint black color. At that time, it must have been very painful, right? Sangwon was slightly distressed. She carefully supported his leg. She wet the clean cotton gauze and carefully washed and wiped his leg. At that time, I was unconscious. How could it be painful? Now that I think about it, I was lucky. Now that you're taking care of me, it's even less painful. Her soft and smooth hand gently stroked the skin on his leg, as if a soft and fluffy brush was brushing across his heart. Wherever it passed, there was a slight itch. Shifengju liked her considerate actions. Even the process of applying medicine, which he originally hated, suddenly didn't seem so annoying. He even secretly liked it. Sangwon giggled. You're only saying that after it's over. If you're not awake when I come, I really don't know. Aya Baba. Why are you saying such inauspicious things? Shifengju chuckled and didn't take it to heart. Instead, his interest was aroused by her. He smiled and asked, if I'm not awake when you come, what will you do? Suddenly, an absurd idea popped up in his mind. He secretly regretted it. If he had known earlier, he would have pretended that he wasn't awake at that time to see her reaction. For a moment, he thought that she would lean on his body and cry her heart out. Wouldn't that make his heart ache? He secretly rejoiced that he didn't do such an absurd thing. What else can I do? Sangwon smiled. Naturally, I'll stay by your side to take care of you and wait for you to wake up. What if I don't wake up? Shifengju was addicted to asking and didn't want to give up. He smiled and asked again. Don't talk nonsense. Sangwon frowned slightly and stared at him. How can you curse yourself like that? If your mother-in-law hears you, she'll probably scold you. Shifengju laughed and said, you know how to use my mother to pressure me. Now that I'm awake, what's the big deal about saying a few words? Wanyang, you haven't answered me yet. Sangwon didn't even think about it. She said unhappily, then I'll stay by your side to take care of you. Shifengju was startled. Suddenly, there was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He said, if I don't wake up, won't you be wasting your time by staying with me? He paused and laughed. If I really don't wake up, I don't know what I should ask you to do. Naturally, I want you to stay by my side. But if I want you to stay like this for the rest of your life, I can't bear to see you suffer. Shifengju seemed to be thinking about something. His voice slowly lowered. Sangwon was at a loss for a moment. She was his wife. Naturally, she should stay by his side. This was a matter of course and didn't need to think about it. But when she asked herself what her true thoughts were, she was also stunned. Her heart was blank and she didn't have any thoughts. Chapter 229. Let's not talk about this anymore. I'm fine now, so wouldn't it be annoying to talk about it, right? Shifengju suddenly laughed again. Sangwon also laughed, and the confusion in her heart disappeared. She nodded and said with a smile, that's right. It's hard to explain if you want to go into a dead end. After cleaning his wounds, she used a clean cotton towel to gently wipe them clean. Then, she evenly applied an amber-colored ointment. She slowly massaged the ointment until it was absorbed by the skin, and then wrapped 2 layers of gauze around his wounds. After carefully placing his legs on the bed, Sangwon let out a big sigh of relief. She was so tired that her waist was aching, and her forehead was slightly sweaty. She then went to take off his robes and looked at the wounds on his arms. They were much better than the ones on his legs, and had already formed scabs. She wiped them clean with a wet towel, applied the ointment and bandaged them. "Let Steward Zhang and the others come tomorrow. You're tired." She raised her head, and Shi Fengju discovered that her forehead was sweaty and she was panting. He couldn't help but feel distressed. Sangwon smiled and shook her head. She softly said, "Those men are rough. Let me do it. I'll be more familiar with it tomorrow." Didn't she come all the way here to take care of him? If she still stood to the side and lazed around, instructing the servants to do the work, what would she look like? Shi Fengju was also happy that she was personally taking care of him, so he smiled and didn't say anything. He just thought that he would let her rest a bit more tomorrow. After finishing, Sangwon called for the servants to come in and take away the wooden basin and towel. Then she helped Shi Fengju onto the bed. Before she could say anything, Shi Fengju had already ordered the servants to bring in hot water to wipe his body. The 2 women hurriedly complied. Once the water was done, everyone lowered their eyes and hurriedly left, gently closing the door. Sangwon suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. She looked at the large tub of hot water in front of the bed, and felt the steam blowing on her face, making her feel hot. "Wan Yang, do you want me to do it myself?" Shi Fengju chuckled and looked at her with interest. "I'll help you get a clean inner garment first." Sangwon finally found an excuse to get used to it. She turned to the wardrobe and took out a set of white soft silk inner garment. She placed it on the bed and rolled up her sleeves to undress him. Shi Fengju obediently cooperated, but he did not take the initiative at all. He wanted her to serve him fully. Sangwon could not help but secretly roll her eyes at him. The embarrassment in her heart turned into annoyance from being teased, and she stripped him naked in an instant. In front of her, Shi Fengju didn't feel the slightest bit restrained or uneasy. Instead, he leisurely leaned back and brushed back a few strands of hair that brushed past his shoulders and hung in front of his chest. He smiled and said, "Wan Yang, hurry up. I feel itchy all over when I see the hot water." Sangwon laughed at his teasing, and the awkwardness from before lessened slightly. She quickly wet the towel and wrung it until it was half dry. Then she unfolded it and wiped it for him. As the hot towel wiped his body, Shi Fengju sighed comfortably and closed his eyes to enjoy it. Wherever the towel passed, his white skin would turn red. As if the hot air had opened his pores, the familiar scent of him suddenly rushed out and hit her in the face with the steam. Sangwon couldn't help but feel a little warm in her heart. Shi Fengju wasn't any better. When he saw her bashful appearance, he just wanted to tease her. Who knew that she would come so close to him? Her warm jade-like hands and cool slender fingertips would touch his skin from time to time, making the blood in his body flow faster. His body felt slightly numb as if it had been touched by lightning. His desire rose uncontrollably, and he suddenly felt his mouth and tongue dry. He didn't dare to move. He could control his body to stay still, but he couldn't control his body's instinctive reaction. He was originally embarrassed, but when he saw that she was even more embarrassed than him, his embarrassment suddenly disappeared. Instead, he looked at her with interest, and the smile on his lips couldn't be stopped. Sangwon had long scolded him in her heart for being shameless and shameless. It was just a brush, but she didn't expect it to be like this. She really didn't know what to say when he was still thinking about it with a body full of injuries. If Shi Fengju knew that she despised him so much, he would cry out that he was innocent. This was not something he could control. If she wanted to blame someone, she could only blame herself. He was a normal man, and it would be terrible if he didn't have any reaction when she served him like this. Sangwon changed the towel. Her hands hesitated for a moment, and then she decisively skipped that area and wiped it down. Shi Fengju saw this and hurriedly said, "Wan Yang, don't. You have to wipe it." Seeing that she didn't speak, he begged again. "Good Wan Yang, you've done everything. Since you've help me thoroughly, okay? You're making me feel so uncomfortable." Sangwon raised her eyes and glanced at him. She could only nod and say, "Oh." She simply didn't hide it shyly, and wrapped the wet towel around it to wipe it. Fengju didn't expect her to do it so suddenly, and was caught off guard by her provocation. He couldn't help but groan in a low voice, and his body trembled greatly. He subconsciously closed his eyes and frowned slightly. In an instant his mind went blank, and he felt all the blood in his body rush to that place with a boom. The sudden feeling of swelling almost made him explode, and he almost couldn't hold it in anymore. He had been away for 2 months, and he was busy searching for his second brother. He didn't have time to think about anything else, and even if he did, he would think about her. He had always been clean. Although he often played around in business, he only drank wine, listened to music, and watched singing and dancing. In his eyes, no matter how beautiful the women in the brothels were, they had been touched by countless men. Just thinking about it made him sick, and he naturally didn't have the interest to do anything with them. In the past, Gu Fengzi was very strict with him, and no girl in the Shi family dared to climb into the young master's bed. Therefore, his wife was his first woman. Once he had tasted it, he would only remember her good points. He didn't realize it at first, but now that she was here, the two of them had been intimate during the day, and it had aroused his interest. Now it was like adding oil to the fire, and his originally repressed control was like a flood breaking through a dam. Fengju couldn't help but feel annoyed and regretful. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have come up with the idea of having her wipe his body. It would be better if he did half of it, and that dog slave Chang Huan did half of it. He could see it, but he couldn't touch it. He deserved to suffer for it. What's wrong? I didn't use too much strength. Did I hurt you? Sangwon felt his whole body tense up. She looked up and saw him frowning with his eyes closed. She was startled and thought that she had accidentally touched the wound on his leg while she was distracted. No, Fengju hurriedly said. My back is a little itchy. Help me wipe it. That's good. Sangwon smiled and let go of that place. She threw the towel down and carefully helped him turn over to lie on his stomach on the bed. Then she wiped his back. When her hand left, Fengju felt a little regret and disappointment in his heart. He actually liked that feeling, and couldn't help but want her to continue wiping that place. But when he thought about it, he felt that it was quite embarrassing, so he gave up. The body in front of her had a slender waist that was just right. His muscles were strong and clear, and his white skin was smooth and flawless. He was like a perfect sculpture with smooth lines. Sangwon had never looked at his body like this before. Plus, he was lying on his stomach and couldn't see her expression. She became a little bolder and stared blankly for a moment. Fengju didn't see any movement from her for a long time. He couldn't help but turn his head slightly to look at her. Seeing her infatuated eyes staring at his body, the fire that had just subsided suddenly rose high again. He smiled at her and said, Wan Yang, do I look good? Sangwon's face suddenly turned red. She came back to her senses and wiped his body vigorously, but she didn't realize that her cheeks were as red as if they were dyed with rouge. Her eyes were bright and charming, and the corners of her eyes and the tips of her eyebrows were charming. Fengju couldn't help but swallow. He turned his head and continued to lie on his stomach silently. He immediately made up his mind. After wiping him, the two of them seemed to be relieved. Your clothes are also wet. You must be tired and sweaty. Quickly go take a bath. Fengju turned back to lie on the bed. He put on his inner clothes and pulled the brocade quilt to cover his body. And let me help you to sleep first, Sangwon said, and went to help him. You take a bath first. I still want to sit down. Fengju smiled and squeezed her hand. Sangwon smiled and let him do as he wished. After taking a bath, Sangwon came forward and said with some hesitation, Your leg is injured, so I won't disturb you. I'll sleep on the bed in the outer room. If you need anything, just call me. You're not someone who doesn't know what to do. Stay here. Look, I've already asked someone to prepare the quilt. Let's each have one. You came all the way here to accompany me. How can I let you spend the night on the bed so pitifully? Besides, I also like having you by my side. How could Fengju be willing to let her go? He held her hand and didn't let go. But what if I touch your injury? Sangwon was still worried. Don't worry, Shifengju said with a smile. The bed is so big. We're not 3-year-old children. Sangwon smiled at his words, and could only agree with a smile. She ordered Luya to sleep on the opposite side of the hall. She put down the brocade curtain, leaving only a small lamp covered by a gauze cover in the corner. She put down the curtain and got on the bed, crawling under the brocade quilt. As soon as she lay down, she felt Shifengju's arm reach over and hug her along with the quilt. Won-young, let's talk, okay? Let's talk tomorrow, Sangwon said vaguely with her eyes closed. Her heart was filled with anxiety. After rushing for so many days on the road, she finally managed to settle down. The moment she laid down, Sangwon felt sleepy. How could she be willing to move? How could Shifengju let her go? He simply lifted the quilt and wrapped her in his own quilt. He hugged her and whispered in her ear, Won-young, we haven't seen each other for more than 2 months. Don't you miss me? After saying this, he lay down on top of her. Your injury. Sangwon was anxious. I don't care. But Shifengju saw that she was still distracted at this time and couldn't help but feel annoyed. He simply covered her mouth. Shifengju was finally satisfied. After cleaning up, Sangwon inadvertently saw that the gauze on his arm was bleeding. She immediately sat up in fright and said nervously, Your arm is bleeding. She hurriedly put on her robe and was about to get off the bed. Won-young, it's okay. It'll be fine in a while. Shifengju hurriedly pulled her back. How can that be? Also, I don't know if the wound on your leg has split open. If I don't see it clearly, I won't feel at ease. Sangwon insisted on getting off the bed. She turned on the lamp and looked at his leg. Sure enough, there were faint bloodstains on his leg. Sangwon's face sank. She hung up the bed curtain and took the gauze and ointment. She helped him remove, wipe, and apply the ointment. She complained, Look, the wound has split open again. I told you not to, but you didn't listen. Shifengju also felt a little embarrassed. He obediently let her do as she pleased and didn't dare to make a sound. He also knew that he had acted rashly just now. It was as if he didn't care about his life. His self-control had always been good. She also didn't deliberately tease or seduce him. But when he saw her, he couldn't care less. Shifengju secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, the wound had only split open a little. It would be fine after she applied the ointment and bandaged it again. If they had to find a doctor in the middle of the night, not to mention her thin skin, even he would feel embarrassed. But he didn't know that when he was thinking this, Sangwon was thinking the same thing. Okay, lie down and sleep. Does it still hurt? Sangwon said softly. She put the things aside after she finished treating his wound. No, it doesn't hurt anymore. You should go to sleep too. Shifengju saw that she was in a good mood again. He couldn't help but feel relieved. He held her hand and lay down with her help and covered himself with the quilt. Sangwon put away the gauze and ointment. Sangwon also got on the bed and gently lay down on his inner side. Shifengju saw that she didn't talk to him or even greet him. He felt that she was still angry, so he reached out and gently pushed her. Won-young, Won-young. Sangwon sighed inwardly. She opened her eyes and tilted her head to look at him. What's wrong? Nothing. I just wanted to call you. Won-young, do you dislike me? Shifengju laughed. Dislike? Sangwon was stunned. How could she dislike him? Besides, what right did she have to dislike him? What nonsense are you talking about? Go to sleep. Sangwon didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could it be because of his injury that this person became a little strange? Really? Then come to my side of the quilt, okay? Won-young, I want to hug you to sleep. Shifengju was insatiable. She was by his side. If he didn't hug her, how stupid would he be? In the dark night, his eyes were as bright as stars as he stared at her, revealing a deep longing and affection. How could Sangwon refuse him? She smiled slightly and moved closer to him. He immediately lifted the quilt to welcome her. He wrapped her up and hugged her tightly in his arms. Won-young, I'll listen to you. I won't mess around next time. You still want to do it next time. Sangwon thought to herself that even if he didn't say it, she would have said it anyway. She smiled and nodded her head. Subconsciously, she snuggled into his embrace and found a comfortable position. Closing her eyes, she fell asleep not long after. Shi Fengju had been lying in bed all day to recuperate. How could he sleep? Listening to her even and long breathing, it was obvious that she was sleeping soundly. It was obvious that she was tired out from the journey. It was such a long distance, but she arrived so quickly. Plus, she was flustered and on edge the whole way. It must have been hard on her. He lowered his head and gently planted a kiss on her forehead. He gazed at her sleeping face and didn't move. He couldn't bear to disturb her. Gradually, the wound on his leg started to burn and itch. It seemed that he had really hurt himself from the intense exercise just now. At this moment, he only felt that the blood vessels in his leg were moving extremely fast, pulsating rapidly. Following the pulsation, the pain and swelling feeling lingered on like maggots in tarsal bones. Shi Fengju finally understood what it meant to reap what you sow. However, he also knew that even if he had to do it again, he would still want her. There was nothing to regret about this. He could only close his eyes and grit his teeth. He just wanted to quickly fall asleep. Once he fell asleep, he wouldn't feel the pain anymore. He didn't know when he fell asleep. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. The sun shone through the window and cast a bright halo on the floor in front of the bed. He could see it through the light gauze curtain. "You're awake." The woman in his arms smiled. Shi Fengju lowered his head and smiled at her. He rubbed his forehead and laughed. "Aren't you tired these days? Why are you awake so early?" Sangwon giggled. She took out a walnut-sized Western pocket watch from under her pillow and handed it to him. "Look at the time yourself. It's still early. I was afraid to wake you up, so I didn't dare to move. You're finally awake." Sangwon said with some confusion. "You lie in bed every day. How can you be so sleepy?" Shi Fengju did not dare to say that his leg was in pain for most of the night. He only closed his eyes in a daze when the sun rose. He glanced at the pocket watch she handed over and smiled. "It's almost noon. Are you hungry? Let's get up." "I'm not hungry, but I can't sleep anymore. If I sleep any longer, my waist will be sore." Sangwon sat up with a smile. She saw his eyes moving around her waist. She glared at him and hurriedly covered herself with the quilt. She put on her underwear and got out of bed to tidy up. Then she took a clean inner garment and helped him put it on. Chapter 230. Luya and the others had been waiting outside for a long time. Downstairs, Manager Zhang Chonghuan and the others were standing and sitting in silence. Seeing that the sun was rising higher and higher, and the temperature was gradually rising, but there was still no movement in the bedroom upstairs. Steward Zhang glanced at it uneasily and couldn't sit still. He coughed and said, "Isn't it time to apply the medicine for the young master?" "Save it, Manager Zhang." Chonghuan curled her lips and said, "Young mistress is finally here. Why should we annoy eldest young master? With young mistress by his side, it's better than any elixir. You don't know, we were in a hurry these days and young mistress didn't rest well. She must be exhausted. Now that she has finally settled down, even eldest young master can't bear to disturb her. If we dare to go up and annoy her, we'll be in trouble. Anyway, I'm not going." Before Chonghuan could finish, Manager Zhang scolded her. He knocked her head twice and scolded, "Brat, are you itching for a beating again? Do you think the masters are made up by you? If you say another word, I'll pull out your tongue." Qianhe and the others lowered their heads and laughed secretly. Chonghuan was sullen. She rubbed her head and sighed. She curled her lips and muttered silently. Although Manager Zhang scolded Chonghuan, he felt that what she said was reasonable, so he didn't mention going upstairs to call them. After a while, he saw the Zhang family and Master Wu coming down from upstairs. Manager Zhang hurriedly stood up and said, "Eldest young master, young mistress, you're up?" "Yes, we need hot water to wash up." Luya asked if lunch is ready. "We'll serve it later. Also, bring a pot of boiling water to make tea." The Zhang family hurriedly said with a smile. Manager Zhang nodded and gave the order. Everyone went to do their own things. After the two upstairs had lunch, it was already past noon. When the medicine was applied and the gauze was removed, Shi Fengju and Sangwon were dumbfounded. The wound on her leg was obviously red and swollen, and there were faint bloodstains. Their eyes met. Sangwon was slightly angry, while Shifengju felt guilty and hurriedly looked away. Steward Zhang, quickly invite Dr. Li over. The wound on eldest young master's leg is not very good. Sangwon stood up and instructed. When Manager Zhang heard this, he also became anxious and hurriedly said, "Is it because of the hot weather these past 2 days that caused inflammation and fever? The old slave will send someone over immediately." Shifengju was mumbling in his heart that Rizhang was going to come up with an excuse to gloss over this matter. Hearing this, he was overjoyed and said with a laugh, That's right. These past 2 days the weather has been too hot. I can't stand it. Get up quickly and call Dr. Li." Steward Zhang was a little puzzled. He thought to himself that this wasn't good news, but rather bad news. Why was eldest young master so happy instead? Wan Yang, it really doesn't hurt. Dr. Li just needs to take a look. Don't be angry, okay? Shifengju saw that Sangwon was sitting to the side and didn't say anything. He knew that she must be angry, so he held her hand and said with a smile, "I caused you to be so angry. If mother finds out, she will definitely blame me for not knowing how to take care of you and be considerate of you. I won't allow it to happen again." How could she not be angry? Sangwon was extremely angry. Steward Zhang and the others weren't really stupid. Just because they couldn't come back to their senses didn't mean that they wouldn't come back to their senses. If they returned and a few words reached their mother-in-law's ears, they wouldn't be able to escape a scolding. When Shifengju heard her say this, he felt a little disappointed in his heart. He sighed and said, "Wan Yang, are you angry because you're afraid that my mother will blame you?" He thought that she was worried about him. Sangwon was stunned for a moment before she came back to her senses. She frowned and said, "What are you saying? I'm naturally afraid that mother will blame me, but seeing you like this, how can my heart feel good?" "Wan Yang." Shifengju smiled. He held her hands and said with a smile, "I'm really fine. Don't worry, when I go back, my injuries will have already healed. Mother will be very happy. How could she ask about these old matters? Moreover, this pain is something that I'm willing to endure. It's really not worth anything. Don't take it to heart, okay?" Sangwon did not know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing that he had lowered himself to such an extent, she knew that she could no longer play with him seriously. She smiled and said, "Quickly lie down obediently and don't move. When Physician Li arrives, let him take a good look at you." Sangwon felt a little guilty. Dr. Li's medical skills should be good. If he really saw something, it would really make her feel ashamed. Shifengju didn't care. He lay down according to her words, but he wasn't willing to let her go. He still pulled her to sit beside him and held her hand as he spoke. It wasn't until Dr. Li came that he let her go and let her hide behind the partition. "You were fine yesterday. How come you're suddenly not fine?" Dr. Li rushed in. After greeting them, he sat on the stool that Luya had brought over and took Shifengju's pulse. He found that his pulse was beating abnormally fast. He slightly frowned and removed the gauze loosely covering his leg. When he saw the wound, he couldn't help but be shocked. "It's inflamed. How could this be?" Shifengju awkwardly coughed and vaguely said, "It seems that the weather has been a little hot these past 2 days. That doesn't make sense." However, Dr. Li flatly denied it. After carefully examining his wound, he stretched out his hand and gently pressed on it. He frowned and said, "Young master, did you do some intense exercise yesterday? Your muscles are slightly strained. Fortunately, your bones are not dislocated. Otherwise, you will have to reset your bones." Sangwon bit her lips and raised her handkerchief to cover her mouth as she secretly laughed. She thought, "You deserve it. Let's see if you'll still care about the front and not the back in the future." Dr. Li's eyes were full of suspicion as he looked at him. Shifengju felt even more guilty. He was quick-witted and smiled embarrassedly. "My wife rushed over from home yesterday. When she saw me, she was so sad and worried. I couldn't bear to see her like that, so I forced myself to walk a few more steps in front of her. I originally wanted to reassure her, but who knew that it would affect the wound? It really wasn't worth it. So that's how it is. Dr. Lee suddenly understood and nodded. He sighed and said, "Eldest young master hasn't fully recovered yet. He must stay in bed and rest well. Otherwise, as the weather gets hotter, it will be extremely detrimental to the wound. Eldest young mistress is a sentimental person. You should persuade her not to worry. After all, it's just a superficial wound. He'll recover after resting for a while. There's no need to worry." You're absolutely right. I should go back and persuade her." Shi Fengju nodded in agreement. Dr. Lee wrote a new prescription and gave a few more instructions before leaving. Steward Zhang personally saw him out and took the prescription to get the medicine himself. Sangwon came out from behind the partition and looked at Shi Fengju with a smile that wasn't a smile. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and let out a laugh. Shi Fengju's face was no longer embarrassed. He smiled and gestured for her to sit beside him. He said with a smile, "Is your husband smart?" Sangwon held back her laughter and nodded. "He's really too smart. I'm so disappointed." "Nonsense." Shi Fengju smiled and pulled her into his arms. He reached out and pinched her chin. "It wasn't easy for me to smooth things over. You're disappointed that I didn't get to see the play." The two of them laughed. Dr. Lee's prescription was indeed effective. After the decoction was washed and the ointment was applied, the burning pain was immediately extinguished. It also made his tense body slightly loosen. Since last night, the two of them didn't do any more intense exercise. With someone accompanying him, Shi Fengju felt happy and contented even though they were only moving in this small space. He didn't feel the slightest bit sad. In less than 2 days, the first quarter's summary account books came from all over the country. In previous years, they were sent to Qingzhou, but this year's situation was special. Shi Fengju had already ordered them to be sent to Handan. Sangwon had also helped him look at the account books before. This time, the two of them naturally looked at them together. Sangwon was bored of drinking tea, playing chess, and chatting all day long. She didn't refuse and looked at the account books with him. Her abacus was as smooth as flowing water, as beautiful as a butterfly flying through flowers. Shi Fengju had seen it before, and this time, he was even more infatuated. He couldn't help but hold her jade-like fingers and kiss them, causing Sangwon to giggle. In the blink of an eye, more than half a month had passed. Shi Fengju followed the doctor's advice and was accompanied by his beloved wife. His wound healed very quickly. As long as the wound was treated at the beginning and stabilized, it would recover day by day. Today, when Dr. Lee came, he said that he could slowly go up and down the stairs and walk around the courtyard. The gauze wrapped around his leg was only a thin layer, and the splint that held his leg in place had been removed long ago. The next morning, the wind was cool, and the air was refreshing. Shi Fengju couldn't hold back, so Sangwon helped him down the stairs. Outside the door, he stood on the green brick floor of the courtyard, looking at the luxuriant leaves swaying in front of him. Shi Fengju took a deep breath and felt a burst of unfamiliar freshness. He couldn't help but stare at the ground and walk around a few times. He laughed at himself and said, "I haven't touched the earth for a long time. Now that I've stepped on it, I feel extremely happy. People say that the most ordinary things are the most valuable. Today, I've experienced 2 parts of that saying." Sangwon said with a smile, "You've just recovered. Let's walk for a while, and then go back to the house. When you're fully recovered, you can stay for as long as you want." Shi Fengju said with a smile, "I've been meditating for a while. It wasn't easy for me to gain some enlightenment, but my Wan Yang didn't give me any face at all. She didn't even agree with me. She's just a wet blanket." Sangwon rolled her eyes at him and said with a smile, Yes, eldest young master is right. It feels good to regain something you lost, doesn't it? Then eldest young master can slowly appreciate it." Shi Fengju laughed loudly and said, "You don't mean what you say." He then took her hand and led her to a cluster of pink and white peonies. He said with a smile, "Wan Yang, look. These peonies are blooming beautifully. Do you like them?" Sangwon's eyes swept across the courtyard. Only then did she notice that there were many large flower vats that were about half the height of a person placed randomly in the courtyard. Peonies of various colors were planted in the vats. At this moment, the garden was bustling with noise and excitement. There were purple-red, pink, crimson, rose red, pinkish white, goose yellow, and so on. Some were of mixed colors, and some were of pure colors. Each of the flowers was the size of a bowl. The flowers were bright and full. They were blooming beautifully on the green leaves and branches, attracting butterflies and bees. Sangwon couldn't help but say in surprise, "Why are there so many peonies? I don't remember seeing this courtyard like this when I came here. Did I remember wrongly?" Shi Fengju tilted his head and looked at her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Chapter 231. Sangwon was baffled. Being stared at by him. She suddenly felt a little guilty. Tilting her head, she tried to recall and smiled. "I really can't remember. Was it because these peonies hadn't bloomed at that time? How long has it been? They've grown too fast." You didn't see the peonies in this courtyard a few days ago?" Shi Fengju finally asked. Sangwon tried hard to recall and shook her head hesitantly. "I spent most of my time upstairs with you. Even when I went downstairs, I only passed by them in a hurry. I really didn't notice them." She smiled again. "If I had seen them earlier, I would have cut a few of them and brought them back upstairs. They would have been fresh." Shi Fengju said dejectedly. "You really didn't see them? If I didn't mention it today, you wouldn't have noticed them? Wan Yang, I specially asked someone to search for them outside for you to admire. I thought you'd already admired them, but you didn't even look at them." Sangwon was stunned. These peonies, he specially asked someone to search for them for her? Looking at the slightly disappointed expression of the man in front of her, Sangwon suddenly felt bad, as if she had done something wrong. "Fengju, these peonies are great. I like them a lot." Sangwon thought for a moment, and took the initiative to hold his arm. She whispered shyly, I've been worried about your injury every day, and I've also been busy looking at those account books with you. How would I have the mood to look at other things? If you didn't mention it, I really wouldn't have thought about the changes in this courtyard. You've done so much for me, so I naturally like it. How could I not like it? Don't be angry, okay?" Shi Fengju was only disappointed for a moment. Even if she didn't mention it, he would have thought of the reason. Hearing her say it, he was relieved and happy. He held her shoulder and smiled. "I just said it casually. I'm happy that you care about me, so why would I be angry with you?" Sangwon smiled sweetly. "That's good. I was too slow and didn't notice the changes in this courtyard." As she said that, she found it funny. "I'll admire them with you. Which one do you like? Let's cut it off and put it in a vase in our room." Shi Fengju hugged her and smiled. Sangwon nodded with a smile. It was unknown who accompanied whom to admire the peony in the courtyard for a while. She was worried that his foot would not be able to bear the pain. So she picked a red and a white branch and had them cut down. Together, they went back to their room. Sangwon turned around and glanced at the colorful flowers in the courtyard. Her heart slightly rippled, and she allowed Shi Fengju to lead her upstairs in high spirits. She didn't think that he would do this for her, and she actually didn't see it. She knew that he was really disappointed at that moment. His slightly hurt expression made her feel slightly guilty. She also felt a little flustered and guilty, so she hurriedly said something else to divert his attention. He could be extremely good to a person, and he could also be extremely bad to a person. She didn't know if she was lucky or unlucky, but she seemed to have experienced both of his extremes. Sangwon was slightly startled, and was at a loss for a moment. "By the way, Wan Yang, I have something to give you." Shi Fengju patted his head as if he had thought of something important. He pulled Sangwon upstairs in a hurry. Sangwon was so flustered that she stopped pondering and hurriedly said, "Slow down. Be careful not to hurt yourself again. It's healed a long time ago. It's not so weak." Shi Fengju laughed and pulled her into the room. "Wan Yang, come. Sit here and wait for me." Shi Fengju pulled her to the dressing table and sat her down on the embroidered stool. He turned around and went to get something. "Why are you being so mysterious?" Sangwon said with a puzzled smile. After a while, Shi Fengju came back with a red lacquered brocade box that was about a foot long and 2 inches wide. He opened the brocade box and took out a hairpin. He threw the brocade box in front of the dressing table and handed the hairpin to her. He smiled and said, Wan Yang, look at this crystal lotus hairpin. Do you like it? Sangwon looked down and carefully examined the crystal lotus hairpin in her hand. It was about a foot long and was sparkling and translucent, without a trace of impurities. There were no traces of splicing between the body of the hairpin and the head of the hairpin. It was obviously made of a whole piece of crystal. The body of the hairpin was cleverly polished into a hexagonal shape. Light reflected and refracted on it, showing a bright and dazzling light. At the head of the hairpin were 2 coin-sized lotus flowers with layers of petals. They were elegant and thin, sparkling and translucent, vivid and lifelike. It was as if they would tremble slightly when the wind blew. A 2-finger-sized crystal butterfly was resting on one of the flowers. The butterfly's wings were erect, thin and sparkling, and the veins were clearly visible. The 2 trembling silver antennae swayed from time to time, as if they were alive. The golden stamen of the lotus was made of golden silk. The golden color shone through the layers of crystal petals, showing a dreamlike beauty. From the center of the lotus hung a chopstick-sized crystal chain. One was long and the other was short. They were inserted into the hair and hung down to the ears. At the end of each chain hung a finger-sized teardrop-shaped gem. One was a translucent jadeite, and the other was a pure pigeon's blood ruby. The color was bright and lustrous, reflecting the pure white crystal, making it look even more noble and otherworldly. Does it look good? Shi Fengjiu put his hands on her shoulders and pretended to hug her. He asked with a smile as if he was presenting a treasure. It looks good. It must be very expensive. Sangwon said with a smile. The hairpin in her hand was heavy and full of feeling. Not to mention the workmanship. Just the material alone was likely to be very expensive. I specially ordered it from the capital for you. Naturally, it's more expensive. Do you like it? Shi Fengjiu said with a smile. How could I not like such a beautiful hairpin? Sangwon smiled, but for some reason, the smile on her face was a little stiff. The more he tried to please her and treat her well, the more she felt a little guilty. It's good that you like it. Come, I'll help you put it on. Shi Fengjiu smiled and took the crystal lotus hairpin. He carefully looked at her hair bun, and then inserted it into her hair. He held her shoulders and admired her in the mirror. He smiled and praised. Wan Yang, you look so beautiful wearing this hairpin. It was worth the effort I put in to get it from the capital. That day when the ship was on fire, I was worried sick. Fortunately, I managed to get it out. What did you say? Sangwon's body shook violently and her eyes widened. She took the red embroidered box that was placed at the side. There were burn marks on the box. It was obvious that someone had rescued it from the fire. She then thought of the scene where Chang Huan swallowed her words and changed the topic. It's all this servant's fault for not looking after young master. We were clearly out, but for some reason young master. It's all this servant's fault. When I wasn't paying attention, young master was hit by a falling pillar and fell into the water. Sangwon suddenly stood up and raised the embroidered box in her hand to question Shi Fengjiu. That day, you were clearly out. Did you go back into the ship to look for this thing? That's why. Fengjiu, is it? Wan Yang. Shi Fengjiu was a little frightened by her expression, and felt a little uneasy. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace. He leaned on her shoulder and laughed softly. Aren't I fine now? Have you forgotten? When Big Sister asked you for that mutton-fat white jade hairpin, I said that I would find a better one for you. Look, this crystal lotus hairpin is better than that one, right? But you shouldn't have put yourself in danger because of this. If something really happened to you, I would only feel sad and guilty every time I see this hairpin in the future. Why would I want it? Sangwon's heart ached and she leaned weakly in his embrace. She raised her hand and tugged at his clothes. Fengjiu, you don't have to be so good to me, really. The way he treated her made her feel a little helpless. She was at a loss and didn't know how she could repay him. She didn't like the feeling of being pressured step by step, and wanted to escape. She didn't know what she could repay him with. The better he treated her, the more frightened and alarmed she felt. He said that he liked her, but he didn't know that every time she heard it, she would feel unnatural. Actually, treating each other with respect and treating each other with respect Wasn't that a good thing? Everyone could live calmly, comfortably, and freely. But he didn't. Shifengyu lowered his head and kissed her gently on the forehead. Hearing that she was sobbing, he couldn't help but be startled. He quickly let go of her and lifted her face. His fingers gently stroked the corner of her eyes to wipe away her tears. Wanyang, don't cry. You're my wife and the woman I like. If I don't treat you well, who should I treat well? Fengju. Sangwon's tears couldn't help but roll down. She lowered her eyes and shook her head gently. Don't say any more. In the future, don't be like this again. Promise me. Okay. I promise you, I won't be like this again. Don't cry, okay? Look at you. I gave you something and you cried like this. Those who don't know would think that I bullied you. Shifengju smiled and wiped away her tears. Sangwon laughed and took out her handkerchief to wipe away her tears. She said softly, Fengju, I really don't care about this. I just want you to be safe and sound. That's enough. And mother, she won't be able to take any scares. Her words were obviously virtuous and filial. But for some reason, when Shifengju heard it, he felt a little disappointed and lost. What was he looking forward to? He was also at a loss. Don't worry, I'll be more careful in the future. I won't let you guys worry. Shifengju smiled. Suddenly he held her shoulders and said seriously, Wanyang, tell me, do you like me? Sangwon was startled. She raised her eyes slightly and met with Shifengju's dark eyes. His eyes were as calm as a lake, and seemed to be staring at her with a little bit of nervousness and suppressed eagerness. Sangwon blinked gently to avoid his gaze. Her heart was in a mess. Although she didn't know why he asked her such a question, her intuition told her that if she answered wrongly, she would definitely annoy him. She nodded subconsciously and softly said, In. Shifengju's eyes suddenly lit up like the brightest star in the sky. His hands on her shoulders tightened and he said happily, Wanyang, you also like me and like me, right? Sangwon nodded. She didn't dare to look into his eyes. She leaned on him and hugged his waist. He was her husband. She couldn't leave him in this lifetime. They were going to spend the rest of their lives together. She would naturally like him, wouldn't she? Chapter 232. Wanyang. Shifengju hugged her tightly and rubbed his chin on her head intimately. He laughed with extreme joy. Wanyang, I will treat you well for the rest of my life. I will never leave you. And I will also be a good wife to you. Sangwon curled her lips and smiled faintly. Time passed peacefully and leisurely. This was what she really wanted. But now, she felt that she could no longer control her heart. After hearing his words, she was happy, truly happy from the bottom of her heart. Her heart also felt slightly warm. 7 or 8 days passed in a flash. After Dr. Li carefully examined Shifengju for the last time, he finally stood up and cupped his hands with a smile. Congratulations, eldest young master. You have completely recovered. From now on, as long as you pay attention to not get injured again and don't tire yourself out from walking too much, you will be as good as before after half a year. I will also get you 2 bottles of scar-removing ointment. You can apply it twice a day and stop using other ointment. Everyone was happy when they heard this and went forward to kneel down and congratulate the eldest young master. Shifengju was even happier. He personally sent Dr. Li out and ordered Steward Zhang to prepare a generous gift to express his gratitude. Of course, everyone who served him was also rewarded. No one was left behind. As for Sangwon, she was fiercely rolled around in the sheets by a certain someone who had just had his first taste. The process was intense and passionate. Sangwon almost did not know what time it was. After the lovemaking, the two of them slept in each other's arms after cleaning up. Shifengju hugged and caressed the woman in his arms who was still weak and vulnerable. When he lowered his head, he could smell her unique scent and body scent. He felt satisfied and happy. He only hoped that every year after this, they would never be separated again. Wanyang, do you want to go to the capital? We are not far from the capital. Why don't I take you to the capital to have some fun? We also have several businesses in the capital city. Let's go there and take a look, Shifengju said with a smile. He had even prepared an excuse. The capital at the foot of the Son of Heaven was bound to be endlessly prosperous, graceful, and noble. All the people of the realm yearned for it, and Sangwon was naturally no exception. Shi Fengjiu continued to whisper seductively into her ear about the delicious food and interesting things in the capital, as well as the beautiful scenery to enjoy. His words made Sangwon even more tempted. However, even though she was tempted, she didn't dare to say that she would go. Shi Fengjiu had been recuperating here for more than a month. Although he had written 2 letters to tell her that he was safe, how could Wang feel at ease without seeing her son with her own eyes? The letter also reminded Shi Fengjiu to return home as soon as he recovered from his injuries. At this moment, Shi Fengjiu was so happy that he had forgotten about it. He dared to forget Sangwon, but she dared not. Instead of returning home after recuperating, he took her to the capital for sightseeing. Wang would definitely skin him alive. Maybe next time. Next time you go to the capital, take me with you and we can go together. Now let's hurry home. Although mother is relieved to know that you are fine, how can she truly feel at ease without seeing you with her own eyes? Shi Fengjiu was a little unhappy when he heard her refusal, but when he heard the end of her words he was startled. He was still unhappy, but he couldn't find any words to refute her. Moreover, he knew that what she said was the right thing to do, and he had forgotten about it for a moment. That was why he said that he would go to the capital with her. Naturally, he was also worried about his mother at home, but for some reason, she was more considerate of others than of him. Even if this others was his mother, he still felt a little jealous. Wan Yang is really virtuous. She always thinks about her mother. You are a daughter-in-law who is better than your son. Don't you think I should respect you more? Shi Fengjiu said resentfully. Why was there a hint of jealousy? Sangwon gently raised her eyes and glanced at the man's face through the dim light from the tent. She felt angry and amused at the same time. Seeing that he was angry, she naturally wouldn't throw a tantrum as that would only make things worse. She took the initiative to rub against him and wrap her arms around his neck. She smiled softly and said, Fengjiu, isn't it good for me to be virtuous? You have such a big family business to support. If you were careless and didn't think of it, I should think of it for you. Of course, I also want to go to the capital with you. We can enjoy the beautiful scenery and taste the delicacies together. How happy would that be? It's just that you have just met with a disaster. Shouldn't you go home first to tell your elders that you are safe and thank your ancestors for their blessings? I know you're also thinking about mother, but you just blurted it out in a moment of carelessness. Even if I agree now, when you come back to your senses tomorrow, I'm afraid you'll have to apologize to me and hurry back home. I reminded you first, but you said those words instead. I was the one who didn't know what's good for me. After Sangwon finished speaking, she turned her body away from his embrace and turned her head away. How could Shi Fengjiu still be angry after hearing what she had to say? Seeing that her face was filled with anger and grievance as she pretended to ignore him, he felt that she was even more pitiful and cute. He couldn't help but pull her into his embrace and said with a smile, I can't win against you. No matter how I look at it, you are the one who is reasonable and right. It's not that you don't know what's good for you, but I said it without thinking. If you weren't reasonable, I'm afraid that I would have to go back on my words and apologize to you tomorrow. My good wife, your husband was careless and said the wrong thing. Your husband will apologize to you. My wife, don't be angry, Anne. How could Sangwon really argue with him? When she heard his words, she chuckled and lightly punched his chest. It's late, let's get some rest. Shi Fengjiu held her hand and kissed it. He said with a smile, Tomorrow, I will ask someone to prepare a boat. We will leave the day after tomorrow. Although it's not in the capital, there is an ancient temple outside of Handan City called the Lingxin Temple. It is the most efficacious. Moreover, the vegetarian banquet there is the best and the scenery is very beautiful. We must go there. I will take you with me tomorrow. This was good. They had been out for so long and stayed in this small courtyard every day. A few days ago, when his legs were better, the two of them would occasionally take a ride around Handan City. In the end, there was no point in looking at the scenery on horseback. It would be good to go out and relax tomorrow. Sangwon nodded with a smile and said, Okay. The two of them didn't speak for the night. Early the next morning, because they were going to the temple, it was inconvenient to dress too flamboyantly. Shifengju wore a moon-white robe with a bamboo leaf pattern, and a belt embroidered with the same silver thread embroidered with the picture of the three friends of spring and winter. On his waist, there was a green jade ring with a long yellow tassel. On his feet, he wore a pair of light black shoes with a foundation. Sangwon wore a long robe with a yellow foundation, green pine flowers, green clouds, bamboo leaf patterns, and red autumn chrysanthemum satin. She wore an ivory white inner garment with a straight collar and a light blue pleated skirt. Her hair was combed into a simple hairstyle with 2 or 3 not-so-bright jade hairpins inserted. Her eyebrows were lightly drawn and she wore a thin layer of makeup. She looked fresh and elegant. It was a rare day out. Other than Steward Zhang, who was leading 2 servants to prepare the boat, everyone else was accompanying them. Everyone was happy. They called for 2 carriages, one for Sangwon and Shifengju, one for Luya and her 2 daughters-in-law, and one for Chonghuan and the others. Lingxin Temple was located on Autumn Cry Mountain, more than 10 li outside of the city. The towering buildings stretched from the mountainside all the way to the top of the mountain. The Hall of Great Strength sat high on the top of the mountain, surrounded by mountains on both sides. If the Hall of Great Strength was compared to the highest part of the back of a round-back chair, the mountains on both sides were the armrests that sloped downwards. The terrain here was excellent, and it gave off the aura of a ruler. Standing in front of the Hall of Great Strength and looking into the distance, at the foot of the mountain, there was a flat and wide pastoral landscape. Further away, there were undulating mountains. The carriage stopped at the foot of the mountain. Shifengju helped Sangwon put on the veil hat and helped her out of the carriage. The veil hat was made of a material called shadow cloud gauze. It was very light and thin. Wearing the veil, one could see clearly through the gauze, but others couldn't see the face of the wearer. There's still quite a distance from here to the top of the mountain. There's not much scenery at the foot of the mountain. The good scenery is halfway up the mountain. Let's take the sedan first and wait until we reach the mountain gate before coming down, Shifengju said with a smile. At this time, there were already sedan bearers waiting for business on the side. Seeing that it was a young master and madam from a wealthy family, they didn't dare to surround them and shout. They just smiled at the side. Sangwon had already seen the sedan waiting for them. Although it was called a sedan, it was actually a bamboo chair with 2 bamboo poles in the middle. The 4 sides were empty, and the top was shaded from the sun. There was a thumb-sized bamboo pole at the front and back of the sedan chair, which could also be used as armrests. Looking up at the Hall of Great Strength at the top of the mountain, Sangwon felt a little apprehensive as she looked at the bamboo sedan chair. She smiled and said, "This won't fall down, right?" Shifengju smiled. Before he could say anything, one of the sedan bearers couldn't wait and hurriedly said with a smile, "Madam, don't worry. We have to go back and forth at least 3 or 4 times a day on this mountain path. We've never had an accident before. It's very safe. Don't worry. They're all used to it. It's very safe." Shifengju smiled and shook her hand. Sangwon smiled and nodded. Shifengju waved his hand and 4 people rushed up carrying 2 bamboo sedan chairs. They carefully placed them on the ground and said with a smile, "Young master, madam, please get on the sedan chair." Shifengju helped Sangwon to sit down and then got on the other sedan chair. The 4 sedan bearers said, "Let's go." They steadily lifted the sedan chair and carried it on their shoulders. Step by step, they walked up the mountain. Luya, Chonghuan, and the others followed at the side. As they walked, the bamboo sedan chair creaked slightly, scaring Sangwon into a panic. She tightly gripped the armrest next to her. After a while, she finally got used to it and gently let go. Shifengju, who was following behind her, smiled and said a few words of advice. He also ordered Luya and the others to carefully follow at the side. Sangwon calmed down and raised her eyes to look at the surrounding scenery. The mountain was verdant and lush, and there were many kinds of vigorous pine trees. From time to time, she could hear birds chirping as they flew past. She could even faintly hear the roar of the water. Below her feet and around her were all kinds of unknown wildflowers. The stars were blooming beautifully. The mountain breeze blew past, bringing with it the unique fragrance of pine needles. It penetrated the heart and refreshed the mind. The sun shone through the thin layer of clouds, and the blue sky was pure and high. It was indeed a very good day to go out. After walking for about half an hour, they entered the first stone gate built with huge stones. On the stone plateau behind the stone gate, Shifengju called out, "Stop!" The sedan bearers steadied themselves and carefully lowered the sedan chair. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.